Coming to you from Blue Cruise Studio in Temecula, California, it's the Whiskey Throttle Show. Taking you inside the lives of the legends and leaders in moto and action sports. Today's guest is brought to you by Yamaha. Yamaha is the industry leader in two-wheeled fun and performance. Celebrating 50 years of YZ in 2024, the Blue Crew is still dominating shootouts and competitions. Yamaha, revs your heart. SKDA is the leader in motorcycle graphics. Driven by a combined passion for art and motorcycles, SKDA has become a global leader in the off-road motorcycle space. Their graphics can be spotted from a mile away with a unique design that blends speed and creativity. SKDA, search and supply of true art within moto. Troy Lee Designs, where speed and style collide. TLD blends elite level safety with the style and swagger that only Troy Lee can deliver. Moto, adventure, bike, paint, casual wear, whatever your passion, Troy Lee Designs is waiting for you on the next level. And by Nihilo Concepts, enhance your riding experience with superior products like the start-stop conversion kit, secondary on-switch, billet components, titanium foot pegs, and more, including the new Map Tuner Nano. You can read and clear codes, monitor sensors, log data, and flash and tune the ECU from any Austrian bike. Nihilo Concepts makes exceptional products, all of which are made right here in the USA. Hey folks, thanks for joining us today at the Whiskey Throttle Show. I'm your host, David Pingree, here in Blue Crew Studio. We've got a really cool guest today. Now, some of you younger guys might not know the name, but he's really like the godfather of motocross here in Southern California. I don't know if you accept that moniker, but man, certainly very influential in the sport in Southern California, which was really the hub and birthplace of it here in the United States. Stu Peters, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we start all our shows with the Nihilo Concepts front-end chatter. It's just some kind of opening stuff. And folks, if you guys have a bike that you're looking to tune up, check out Nihilo Concepts. Amazing products from those guys. Motocross really became a family affair for you, and we're going to get into your whole story of why. But, your son Mark, who's here with us today, still building all Supercross tracks here locally for the manufacturers. Your daughter ran the events. I remember Sandra signing people up, and it was like the whole family, all hands on deck.
My wife worked in the sign up in the scoring tower for the first 2 or 3 years, and then Sandra kind of took over, and she stepped back, and so it worked out really well as far as the whole family was involved in the thing, and we'd bundle up and take off and go do our things at the different tracks. And I bought this house in Mission Viejo that I'm living in right now because I sold it to my daughter a few years back, and I moved back in it. It was halfway between Carlsbad and Saddleback.
Perfect spot.
It was 45 minutes to Carlsbad Raceway, 25 minutes to Saddleback Park. So that was, and then those days I was running at Ascot. I got involved with Ascot Park before the Agajanians did. There was a guy named Harrison Schooler, that a promoter, and they had 40 racehorses, Hollywood Park type racehorses down at the stables. They had stables built behind the track at Ascot, the half-mile track.
Okay.
And this guy was a horse lover, and he was a runner. But anyway, I learned a lot from the guy who was down there 2 or 3 years, and I ran Ascot for a year and a half. I was kind of general manager, did car racing and sprint cars and everything. But because the motocross was so successful, the guy thought, well, maybe I could do something for the other things. And so I ended up doing the promotions on the stock cars on the Sunday nights and the sprint cars on the Saturday nights and the motocross. And those days we were Wednesday, because they had the half-mile nationals, half-mile AMA races on the half-mile on Friday nights.
Jeez.
And so we got Wednesdays.
Yeah, you guys were racing. I hear this all the time from folks back in that era. It was like, you raced like 6 nights a week. Guys raced all the time.
Well, yeah, in those days, yeah, you had the 2 or 3 tracks. You had the old Corona Raceway and the Indian Dunes, and I had a couple tracks between Ascot and Irwindale or Lyons drag strip. We ran at Lyons drag strip for a while, and so it was one of those deals where, like I say, guys like Bruce McDougall and David Pessy and Todd Peterson. They made a really good living. They were all living at home. Mom was doing the laundry for them. And,
eating their food and just making money.
Fixing dinners for them and sandwiches. And they were, all he had to do was worry about the payment on their van.
Well, I had somebody say, maybe this was Mitch, as I was chatting with him about your career, and he said, that guy probably has dropped more motorcycle gates than anyone in the world.
I would agree.
I mean, you were
John Bethea did a book. I tried to find one. He worked years on a thing. It's about 2 inches thick. It's got a blue cover. I'd love to get one because it was based around CMC, and then he did all the other racing events. He went up Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and the main thing, at least the publisher told him it was a flop because it didn't have a lot of pictures in it. It was all stats.
Oh.
But that kind of a book would be priceless.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
And anyway, he reckoned that I had my career of almost over 48 years, coming up 49, that I had seen about 6,000 races because we ran I ran 22 years at Ascot Park and it was, a weekly show.
Yeah.
And then I was 18 years. I opened and closed Saddleback Park, had the first event there. In fact, a little story on the first event. Vic Wilson said, "Hey, I'm going to get a couple superstars to lay the track out for us." And I said, "Okay." And we'd been planning it for a couple of weeks. Turned out that Roger DeCoster, Torleif Hansen, and a couple of the other Swedish guys were with them. They were coming back from some event, and they were wearing, clothes they traveled in, nice shoes and slacks. And this area was Peters Canyon, which was just before the entrance originally happened. It was right there on San Antonio Canyon Road, and archery range was there, and they had it was all burned area. It just had a fire there about 3 weeks before, just a small one, a small brush fire. And those guys ruined their slacks and their shoes. And
all covered in black.
They were all, and I had a couple of the guys complaining bitterly that I should have paid for new clothes for them.
Oh,
anyway.
That's funny. I don't think people know, unless they were a part of it, how big the Golden State and motocross racing was in Southern California in like the 80s, I think especially into the 90s.
Yeah, 70s. We had a lot of good Golden States in the middle 70s up through the late, and then the 80s was huge.
Huge.
We had many, many races with over 1,000 riders, and that was 2 days. And when we went to places like Sand Hill Ranch or Saddleback, which were popular tracks, Sand Hill up in Northern California, Saddleback in SoCal, we would run a back track and a front track, and do two sets
simultaneously.
Simultaneously, I have 2 sets of 2 starting gates, and I always had one on a trailer that I hauled up to these tracks.
Jeez.
And my support unit would be kind of centrally located, but I'd have a team scoring and starting and stopping the races on the back track, and the same on the front track. And that's the only way we could get anybody. We tried to give everybody their money's worth as far as riding.
Well, I remember coming over as a kid, and especially early on, mid-'80s.
Yep.
And there would be 5 or 6 heats of like 125 and 250 novice just to make the motos. Like you had to qualify even to race. Same
thing with pros. My biggest pro race ever was in 1973. It was when the monoshock Yamaha came out on the 125. They put there around, and guys I know drove as far as Canada to get a 125 because they were sold out on the West Coast immediately. Everybody thought that was the newest, greatest thing, and so they had to go to Canada and up through the Northwest to dealers just to buy them off the floor. People go up there, but I had over 340 pros. We had divisions.
Jeez.
Divisions of 250s. We always had divisions of 125s and divisions of 250s, but that day we even had divisions of 500s.
Wow, was that a Golden State?
No, it was a $3,000 purse at Saddleback Park.
Jeez. That's insane. I mean, it'd take you all day just to qualify down to who's making the motos.
That's right. Well, another story that comes to mind, I'm telling you, when Brad Lackey rode his first Golden State a couple of years before he headed off to Europe and conquered the 500 World Championship, he showed up at a Golden State in Northern California, and he didn't even qualify.
Is that right?
He didn't qualify for the final. And he said, I don't understand it. I said, Brad, I says, they don't care what your name is. All the young pros, they were trying to just make money, to guess. I mean, I had Bob Hanna sitting on the starting gate one time at Saddleback and said, Stu, I got to win the second moto or I won't have enough gas money to get home. That was when he was riding for Whittier Husky.
Well, was he messing around or was he serious?
No, he was serious.
Okay.
He had nothing. He lived with his uncle out there in Palmdale, and he just made himself a track out behind his uncle's house, and it just turned out to be a big whoop section. It was like Carlos Serranos out of Arizona, Tucson. I had a situation where we ran the back track at Shadow Glen when we went to Indian Dunes. Uh-huh. I didn't like the front track. It was too much like a TT. But the back track had all the, up to who, and had a couple good sections of whoop sections. And Staten came up to me about halfway through the day, and he says, Stu, who in the hell is that guy on the Honda that he passed me like I was standing still? And he described the guy, and I said, oh, that's Carlos Serranos. He's out of Tucson. I said, that's all the guy has is whoops and a sand track in Tucson. Yeah. And so he was a rocket on there. But gave a lot of guys a good stepping stone to go to their next events. Yeah. I've had several riders like Lackey and Brock Glover, Rick Johnson, come up to me and say, Stu, if you guys hadn't set us up on the right path, I don't know where we'd be at this time, because we gave them such a great stepping stone to where they could just go out and conquer. Because the first few years of the Nationals, of half a dozen, first 6 places were all Southern California guys.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this was the hub of the sport.
Yep.
Nationally, for sure. And racing a Golden State or just the events you were putting on, they were just as big as a National. It was essentially a National. Yeah. So those guys were getting lessons and experience and competition
absolutely
like nobody else.
And they had to ride fast. I mean, it was, not just like nowadays they say they're lucky if they get 10 or 12 pros to a local event.
Yeah, different time for sure. Well, I want to get into your whole story. First, I want to remind you guys, get over to whiskeythrottlemedia.com if you haven't looked at that. We've got moto, off-road, dual sport content, all kinds of stuff. A new free ride segment called Hang Time. Our merch is available to buy over there, including these shirts here. So check it out. We appreciate you guys doing that. And our guest story is brought to you by Yamaha. Join the Blue Crew if you haven't. Get on the best bikes. All right, let's talk about where you grew up, Stu. Because I thought you were a Southern California boy, but no. Illinois.
Born in Chicago on September 18th, 1938. Lived there for a short period of time. It was an area called Lincoln Park West. On the wintertime, we could see the lake from our apartment. All the trees didn't have any leaves on them, so we could see Lake Michigan. And, of course, in the wintertime or summertime, it was all blocked off by the trees. And I made many a trip with the family in a red radio wagon to the beach.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
That was the summertime fun?
That was the summertime fun.
Yeah, that is a cool – I mean, I don't know what it was like back in the late 30s, early 40s. How long did you stay there before you guys moved?
We moved to Libertyville, Illinois, a couple of years. I don't know. I don't know what age I was at that time. I'm going to guess I was probably in second or third grade. And we moved to Libertyville, lived there for a couple of years. It was a little farming community. It's a big city now, right 60 miles north of Chicago. And I remember my dad worked for a company in Chicago, and my mother would drive him to the train station every morning, and he'd take the train in Chicago.
Is that right?
Yeah. And we lived there for a few years. And in 1949, my folks said, hey, we're moving to California. Of course, I said, okay. I was 9 or 10 years old at the time. So I climbed in the car, and we drove from that area, Illinois, to the west end of the San Fernando Valley. And we lived in a place called Tarzana, which is now a pretty good-sized city. At that time, it was, and that's where I grew up in the west end of the San Fernando Valley. That's where I met Preston Petty and Paul Hunt and a couple of the other guys that I hung out with for years. And we did rode our motorcycle. We all had street bikes. We didn't have motocross bikes. We didn't have luxury. I mean, what we had was what we bought or we had ourselves. And we used the Santa Monica Mountains as a training session, all the cow trails and deer trails.
Well, it had to, back late 40s, 1950, let's just say even, what does Tarzana look like? I can't even imagine. It had to be, like you said, now it's just a sea of concrete and
houses,
houses.
It was just a couple streets. I lived on Lindley Avenue. The only reason I know that street well is because it was printed on my AMA card, my District 37, and I was involved with the AMA as a rep for our club. I belonged to the Scramblers Motorcycle Club.
Okay.
And I was a rep for and I would go to the meetings they had once a month down in Pasadena. I'd drive over there, and they had these district meetings for the whole district, for the whole 37 district, and all the clubs. But that day was just, you had to be in a club.
Yeah,
and,
different.
Yeah,
the way it worked. Did you have siblings?
I have a brother and a sister. A sister 2 years younger. Unfortunately, she's passed, and my brother is 6 years younger than me, and we don't see each other much.
Oh no, is he out here or is he?
No, he's out here.
Okay.
But he does his thing, and I do my thing.
Gotcha. So, what did you do prior to motorcycles? Like, when you came out here, had you already been introduced to bikes?
No,
or no? Okay.
No, not at all. My introduction to it was a 175cc street bike. It was made in West Germany, because at that time there was a stipulation between West and East,
Right.
and so everything had to have their logos on it. And a West German two-stroke. It looked like a CZ. It had a twin port, but it was twin pipes, but it was a single cylinder, and it was street bike tires, and we rode Mulholland Drive. We'd get on it to Topanga Canyon and drive all the way ride all the way to the Hollywood Bowl, and they had a big fire break because they didn't have helicopters or any of that kind of stuff in those days, and so they just had a couple of big fire breaks across the Santa Monica Mountains that they used to get all the firefighting equipment up there when they had the big fires.
Yep.
And one day, Preston and I and Paul, Preston had a 100 NSU. I don't remember what they called it. It was a 100cc NSU street bike. And I had the 175, and Paul had a 200cc English-made thing with a Villiers motor in it. And we were all riding, doing our little thing on Sunday. And all of a sudden, a bunch of guys came up behind us, and it turned out to be Jack O'Brien and Jack Baldwin and a whole bunch of guys that were, big-time guys and all riding their dirt bikes. And they said, well, we were following you guys for a few miles, and you're going pretty good for the tires you got on those bikes. And we just had the little Chevron tire, the Chevron-type tire, you know. And we said, oh, yeah. They said, you ought to have knobbies on it. And we said, yeah, whatever we could afford.
Yeah.
And we were just kids, and that's where we learned to ride.
So about 15, 16?
I started riding that bike 14 and a half. In those days, you could get a learner's permit.
Okay.
But I didn't do me any good for a car because I had to have a licensed driver with me, and both my folks worked, and they both were working in the Hollywood area. My mom was a school teacher, and my dad was a car salesman.
Okay.
And so they weren't around, so I needed to get a motorcycle.
So you could ride a motorcycle with a permit?
With a permit, yeah. I could ride the motorcycle. That was the whole idea.
Huh.
Because in those days, there was no RTDs or anything in the San Fernando Valley. You had a school bus was the only buses that were just take you to wherever school you were going to. And I met Paul in Sutter Junior High. It's out in the west end of San Fernando Valley. And about a year later, I met Preston just riding up in the hills. He came zipping along on his 100cc NSU, and we became good friends, and both of them have passed now, but we were lifelong buddies for a long time.
And so in this window, there wasn't really racing going on, was there?
Yeah.
Oh, there was?
Mostly Yalt Desert.
Okay.
That kind of stuff. Because later on, when I was in high school, both Paul and I, we ended up working for Bud Eakins, his first shop in Woodland Hills. It was an old little awning shop. It was an aluminum building with a big chain link fence all around it, and that was his first. He was a Triumph aerial dealer because he was riding Triumphs for Johnson Motors. He was sponsored by him to do the desert because he was a hero out in the desert.
Yeah.
And so we ended up working for him, putting new bikes together, because in those days you couldn't buy a dirt bike. I mean, it was a street bike, and then everybody took it home. But as a dealer, he had to bolt everything on it, the battery, all the lights, the turn signals, everything had to be on the bike.
For legality.
To sell it. And then when the guy bought it, the first thing he did was peel all the stuff off.
Yeah, right.
And so I worked for him for a couple of years and bought an aerial, and Paul and I bought Tiger Cubs from him in 57 when the Tiger Cub came out with a true slinging arm and shocks and everything on the back. Because before that, the Tiger Cubs they didn't have a really good suspension system on them. So, and we raced those. Then I went from there to a Mako, and then in 1959, I got lucky enough to get a sponsored ride with Jawa, with Walt Axhelm, Bill Messer Sr., Paul, and myself were the 4 riders that were sponsored by him. They had a shop down on Wilshire Boulevard, a distributorship. That's where the distributor was, and I rode those bikes for 2 or 3 years. During that period of time, I rode the one big race I rode was the Hopetown Grand Prix, and I won the 350 expert class on a Honda, riding Andy Kobe at that time. He was one of the first Honda dealers, or the first Honda dealer on the West Coast to get the franchise.
Yeah.
And so I was riding for him. Preston and I both were riding for him.
And they made 350s?
No, they made a 305.
Oh, okay.
But we punched it out to like a 340, 335. Andy he was a machinist at Rocketdyne.
Okay.
The big aircraft thing there.
Yep.
And so he was a supervisor of the machine shop, and that's where he met Dave Eakins. Dave Eakins was something to do with the machine shop, because it was Kobe and Eakins who had this little shop and in Woodland Hills on Ventura Boulevard. And so they just punched those bikes out. I don't know. They came to 305 from Japan, and they worked it out where they could put a sleeve in it, bore it and put a sleeve in it and make it a 335 or something like that. And it had enough power to where they would ride it, and we had good suspension on it, and so I won that particular race that day at Hopetown. But
what were some of the other? I remember Hopetown, or hearing of it,
Yeah.
obviously a little before my time. But what were some of the other big events? Like, was the
Catalina
Catalina Grand Prix?
Catalina Grand Prix started in 1951 and went to 1958. Unfortunately, there was a collection of motorcycle guys that weren't really dirt bike riders, but they all showed up because it was a big event, and everybody could take the ferry boat over there and have a good time for the weekend. And they had some kind of a argument and beat up one of the officials at Catalina, the mayor, or the second brother to the mayor or something. I don't remember all the details, but that's what's closed down. The city of Avalon said, we're not going to have any more motorcycle races. And then they had that one.
I did it.
Oh.
Yeah, early 2000s,
yeah.
maybe 06,
Yeah, Preston
7.
did it too.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he won his class. It was a senior class.
Yeah.
But anyway, we ran that. I was sponsored for that event. A lot of times back in those days, you'd get a sponsorship for a month or two. A dealer would say, hey, I'll give you a bike. I want you to ride this, and this event.
Oh, really?
And you just ride them, and when you're done, you'd give it back to them. And it was totally different than it is now, as far as. And
so when you would get a bike, was there the same? Like, would you go get the suspension set up and?
Oh, you'd have to do some tweaking of it. Preston and I got pretty good at taking the shocks off of another bike and putting them on another bike, and
Okay.
this dealer was Marty's Foreign Motors, was a Mako dealer, and in Santa Monica, and he loaned me a bike, a 175, and I actually rode it for quite a while. I got pretty good in the 175 class, and we rode at that particular time, and unfortunately, they never told me about the switch on the gas tank. So if you turn the switch upside down, or the little lever upside down, you get the reserve. And so I just turned it up, put it on, and I ran out of gas.
Oh,
On the Catalina Grand Prix.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it was an event, something. But I'd gone over there earlier years, pitting for friends of mine, older guys that were riding, and they just took me along for the ride. So I was at 2 or 3 of the Catalina races before I rode the last one they had in 50, or officially the last one in 58.
Jeez, what was the crowds? I mean, were they getting
it was
good numbers?
Packed. I mean, a lot of riders. I mean, Catalina's not a real big place, and that was when they ran through the streets right downtown Catalina. And if they had a telephone pole or a light pole or something, they just put a hay bale against it. Nowadays you could never do that. The insurance company would have a coronary.
Yep. Little looser program back then.
Yeah.
Who was the guy? It was a fireman.
Feats Manert.
Feats Manert.
Yeah, Tuck Manert. I knew him well.
Okay.
He was riding a Gold Star. He won it one year.
Yeah, he won that race, right?
Yeah. And then there was, he I actually got to know him pretty good. He lived out there near where we had the ranch. He was in that general area. He retired and he flew an airplane. He was an enthusiast. He had a little single seat or whatever, it was a small airplane. He had an airstrip at his house, and he'd take off and fly over the ranch and fly around there. And like I said, I've knew him for a long time.
Huh. Okay, so your first race, do you remember what was your very first race?
Oh, probably would have either been Malibu Canyon. That property was owned by Bob Hope at the time, which was amazing. The guy allowed motorcycle racing, and he was a big guy. I mean, big performer.
Yeah,
and worth a lot of money. And he owned all this property, a couple hundred acres out there. It was in Malibu Canyon, and on the way to the beach, and it was called Crater Bowl. And they even ran night races out there. The guys got those. They went to a rental company and rented lights,
Really?
Put lights around it. In the summertime, it was a big deal. And
I just can't imagine a dirt bike race in Malibu Canyon.
Yeah.
I mean, knowing what that property is like now.
Oh, yeah. It's $1 million houses on
Oh,
the hill.
yeah. They wouldn't stand for a motorcycle even starting,
No.
That's crazy. What do you remember? What's kind of comes back from that first race and that?
Oh, the first race.
The first couple races you did, was it?
Well, my first races were actually out in the desert. In my very first hare scrambles, I rode to the races with Bud Eakins. He had a pickup truck, I didn't. And in those days, you just had a tire on each side of the pickup truck, and you just you just rolled your bike on and laid it against the tire.
Okay.
There weren't any tie downs or anything like that. And he won the event, and I broke my ankle about, 50 miles into the race, the second or third lap.
Yeah.
Hit a big one of those pucker bushes, they used to call them out in the desert. And I had this matchless 1952 jam pot. They used to call them jam pot because of big old fat chocks. And had aluminum triple clamp, and the triple clamp broke.
I've been there.
And it was, and I fractured my ankle, and that was it. But I never went back to the desert ever again.
Where were they doing desert races? Was it still like Johnson
Red Rock, Jawbone Canyon, out in those areas, the same areas. You had to drive, a couple hours out of L.A.
Yeah, okay.
And
I didn't know if they had stuff closer to the valley.
No, they were out there in the desert. And
and the scrambles, same thing?
Yeah, the scrambles. We had a track in Acton, had a track down there in Long Beach. They called it Rusty Nails because they had army base for the civilians housing down there. And when they got through to close it, the quickest way the government thought it was just burn the buildings down. So they burned the buildings down, left big piles of nails. The only thing that survived was the nails. And so you went down there with the idea of fixing 2 or 3 flats in a day.
Jeez.
So anyway,
That's funny. And you were kind of talking a little bit about the bikes back then. There wasn't really dirt bikes so much, was it?
No. Everybody converted a street bike. The Triumphs were all TR6s and TR5s, street bikes. And they peeled them all off. And Bud would sell, that's all he ever sold was Triumph dirt bikes and aerials. The Scrambler, the 500 Red Hunter single cylinder came as a dirt bike. That was the only one that actually came kind of as a dirt bike. It had an open exhaust and still had a battery on it. I guess it was one of the laws. You had to put a battery, so you had to take the battery box off.
Had a Kickstarter, but also had a battery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for lights.
Okay. Gotcha.
And you had to take the lights off of it.
What was kind of try to explain what the sport looked like back then. Was there big crowds at that time?
Well, for like a Catalina race, a big crowd. For some of the desert races, they had some pretty big crowds, like the Big Bear race that went for a number of years. And then there was, I'm trying to think, they had some other races in the desert that were pretty good size. But most of the scrambles races would be maybe a couple hundred guys.
Okay.
And that was it.
So a big size would be what, 300, 400, 500? Was it that big at the time?
Oh, they weren't. I don't remember any of them being that big.
Okay.
They were something that you could, not too many divisions. Maybe you'd have 2 divisions of the 200 class, 2 divisions of the 250 class, because those are 2 classes that were pretty big back at that time.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to get a sense of how big the sport was at the time.
No, it had probably 30 clubs, motorcycle clubs, like the Shamrocks and the Checkers and the Scramblers, and everybody had a rep from their club, and I was the rep of the Scramblers for 2 or 3 years, went down once a month to these meetings they had down there, and set the schedules up and all that kind of stuff. Got involved in that.
That's interesting. Who are some of the biggest names at the time?
Bud Eakins, Dave Eakins, his brother. He rode in the 250 class, and Chuck Minert, and I should have written down some riders' names, but Eddie Molder. Remember, he won the Big Bear Grand Prix when he was like 18, 17 years old, and that put him on the map.
Okay. With
a Triumph, and there was quite a few pros. I mean, like a general race at Scrambles at Crater Bowl, which is one of the tracks that attracted a lot of riders for a couple of reasons. One, you were close to the ocean, so you got that breeze in the afternoon come up the canyon. It's kind of like racing at Carlsbad.
Yeah.
It was the same thing. You got to be a little bit cooler than racing a race in inland.
Yeah, of course.
And so they, you'd get, like I said, a couple hundred riders. Maybe 250 would be a good size race back in those days.
And you were the 250 pro class, or what were you racing at the time?
When I was riding the expert, there was no pros. Okay, they didn't pay any money. Everybody rode for a trophy.
Oh, there was no money?
No money. I mean, all those races that Bud won, which were dozens and dozens and dozens of them, he had trophies all over his shop. In fact, he built some shelves, had some guy come in on the weekend in this little shop he had and built a shelf all the way around about 2 feet down so he could stick all the trophies on them.
Yeah, right. And, was there something to that, like it almost kept the sport a little more pure? Anytime you interject money into something, it always changes it a bit, you know?
I don't know. I know a lot of guys used to run additives in their gas that they thought gave them a definite advantage, octane boosters and stuff like that.
So they were still cheating, and
yeah,
it was the same.
A little bit of cheating, but not that bad. But
gotcha. And so, tell me about kind of the process from you're racing expert. I don't know what years that was, but when did you leave to go to Europe? Because this was something I learned about you that I want to really dive into. Was you're racing in Europe?
Right. The end of 1961. Bud was a big reason why I went there. He used to get the English newspapers, but he had them airmailed in. He'd pay for the airmail. Okay. Otherwise, he'd be a full week behind. So we got them, like in the middle of the week, and we'd just go through those papers all the time, the Cycle News and a couple of the other English papers that were full of. And so he kept saying, Stu, you're the right age. I was 19 at the time when I was working for him. He says, that's when you ought to, figure you ought to go. Well, I didn't. I went there in the end of 61. I said, okay, I'm going. Well, about 10 of my friends said, hey, wait for me. And I said, no, I'll wait for you. I'll give you my address when I get there. Nobody ever showed. But I packed my suitcase. I had a leather bag with my Bates leathers, Levi leathers, and lineman boots. You didn't have motocross boots back in those days.
It was just like a leather boot.
The lace-up, big, tall lace-up boots.
Okay.
And I had a McCall helmet that was one of the newest helmets that were full coverage. And then I packed a small bag of clothes and a toolbox. And that was it. And I climbed on a red eye at LAX, flew to New York, and in New York, I stayed a couple days there. My sister, she had a life of her own. She worked for the Playboy Club for about 11 years.
Oh, really?
As a bunny.
Oh, yeah?
And very, very attractive young lady, very smart. She had 2 or 3 degrees when she stopped going to college. And because that was a job, she worked at nights and she'd go to school during the day. She thought it was cool to get an education. But anyway, I stayed with her a couple of days, and then there was I had it all arranged through a travel agent at that time. The MS Berlin was an ocean liner, 612 feet long, had like a half a dozen decks, and that's from New York to Bremerhaven, Germany. And then when I got to Bremerhaven, Germany, climbed on another train, went to Paris. My mother had a great uncle on my mother's side of the family. His name was Gene Schlesing. I'm probably not pronouncing the last name right, but anyway, he ran a travel agency in Paris. And so when I showed up, he thought it was great. I could go on all the little excursions that they had around Paris, and I would grade the guys that were doing the tour that he was paying them to do it. He'd ask me at night when I came back, hey, how did the guy do? Did he do a good was he a good guy? Did he do a good thing? As I lived with him for 3 weeks. It was only supposed to be a weekend, but it turned out that I helped him out. So he said, oh, you can stay at my house. And it was downtown Paris. In fact, his office, he looked out his main window and right down the street to the Eiffel Tower was the view he had every day from his office.
Jeez.
He had 3 daughters. They all turned out to be, one was a physicist, the other was a brain surgeon, and the other one was something else. They're all very, very smart, educated. That was when I first really realized how the people in Europe operated. They would have 6 magazines come to their house every month from 6 different countries. And their good job of those girls was to learn the language, read them. You could read, write, and speak English, German, French, Italian. Anyway,
Jeez.
I've got a story later on about my wife's dad, how educated he was, but that's later down the line. And anyway, I ended up, like I said, stay there about 3 weeks. Got to go see the.
Yeah, you got the tour. I mean,
as far as the palace there, the Versailles Palace outside of Paris. Got to go see the underground gardens and all the stuff that they had, because one of the Louis, I don't remember which one, 6th or something, he wanted to have a full-blown garden. So they had steam heat back in the old days, 1600s, whenever, and they would have 400 people, 500 people plant all the trees, plant all the flowers, so the guy could wake up on Easter Sunday or whatever and open his drapes of his house and see everything in full bloom.
Okay.
And that was one of his little traits.
Quirky fella.
Yeah, right.
What was Paris like then versus, maybe the last time you saw it? Or
The last time I saw it was 25 years ago, I guess. It was just a muddle of streetcars and mopeds, hundreds of mopeds. I don't know if they have probably everybody bought a car now. They don't want. The traffic jams are terrible. I remember we'd take the all-night ferry, and we'd get in at 5:00 in the morning, in from Dover to Ostend, Belgium, and then from Ostend, Belgium, we'd catch we drive from there to Paris, through Paris. If you got there at 5:00 or 6:00 in the morning, you'd get through Paris in 2.5 hours. Otherwise, it was a full day.
Just to go through the city.
Go through the city because it was so jammed up.
And the roads are so narrow anyway.
Oh, yeah, they were narrow.
Okay, so when you went over, was there a plan? Did you have a team? Did you
Nope.
have a...
No, I had a letter from Nick Nicholson, who was a Greaves dealer in North Hollywood at the time, and I was brought... One of those days, those times I was telling you, they just give you a bike for 3 or 4 races. They gave Preston a 360. That was the first 360 that he bought over, and I was riding the 250 class. So he set up a deal with me for the Greaves factory, which turned out to be in the northern part of England, which I never visited, and I'll tell you that story. But I had a bike and parts for 6 months, and then after 6 months, they were going to sit down and evaluate the situation and say, okay. But when I got to Paris, or when I got to London, I met a bunch of guys, some Australian guys, and another American that was over there, Hoppy Hopkins. Okay. He wasn't a famous rider here. He left here because he got tired of paying child support and alimony. So he skipped out, and he'd been over there 2 years before I got there, working at Comerford's, the same place I ended up getting a job there. And he said, Stu, you're not going to make any money riding a 250. You got to ride a 500. So I set out with the idea of, okay, I had this much money, and I ended up meeting a guy called Graham Beamish. He was one of the early BSA riders. He lost his one eye with a rock. The goggles back in those days were like the goggles we had here in the 60s. Had the little fur around the edges, cheaper than hell.
Yeah.
Little strap on the back, and they didn't hold up very well with rocks. And
so a rock would hit it and it go
right through it.
Oh,
and he lost his eye, so he sold his bike to me. It was kind of a fact. It had Norton forks on it, and it had Norton front wheel, and it had a couple other little things from the Norton factory that we could bolt on the BSA. But it was a Gold Star 500cc single.
Okay.
And that's what I started riding on. And in fact, that was the bike I rode up until I rode that for the first 3 years. And the last 2 years I was there, or a year and a half, I rode a matchless Matisse. That was when the Matisse came out with the Rickman brothers, Derek Rickman, and we ended up modifying the hell out of it. I put we took the BSAs at that time had a side panel which was an air cleaner with a couple of little chore boys in it, to keep the rocks out, but it didn't do anything with dust. And over there in Europe, the races we rode, if it was a hot summer, it'd be a dusty track. They didn't water anything or prep anything.
They just staked it out?
They just staked it out, and that's the way you rode it. And if you didn't like it, you didn't ride, you wouldn't get paid. So everybody rode. They just went, okay, I'll ride the event.
Jeez. But so where were you based out of? Did you say you stayed in the UK then?
I stayed in the UK until I had 2 contracts that I mailed. You had to mail in for everything. Some of the races you're almost a year ahead of time signing up. And so you had to plan everything ahead of time. I had 2 races. One was Bordeaux, France, in the south of France. That was my first motocross in Europe. And I loaded my bike on a train. I didn't have any transport. And
so it would have been, what, 62?
Yeah, 62.
Okay.
Loaded the bike on the train and and I sat in a regular passenger thing, and it was a mail car, and I headed for Freiburg, Germany. I met a guy named McCarthy. I can't think of his first name right now. Ray McCarthy. Ray McCarthy was an American that had married a German girl, and he set up a laundry. Found out that the GIs didn't like to do their own laundry, so he got a laundry thing going. He had about 40 people working for him and a bunch of Volkswagen buses, and delivering and picking them up and delivering them and stuff. And so he had a Volkswagen for sale, and I knew about it. I heard about it. And so I called him on the phone, could naturally talk to him, being an American guy. And he said, sure, I'll sell it to you. No problem. It runs and stops, starts, and runs. And I said, okay.
Stop, starts, and runs. The bare minimum.
Yeah, that's it. It was one of the very early Volkswagen buses. I found out later had like a 25 horsepower motor on it.
Oh, my gosh.
50 miles an hour was pretty much top speed on that thing. But it got me around for almost a year, before it started coming apart. Then
just the logistics alone of like, okay, I'm going to put my bike on a train. I've already signed up for this race via mail a year ago. Passports. I mean, it had to be difficult getting from country to country back then, too.
Back in those days, I got a passport. It's in storage right now, or bought it. It's got a 40-page extension in it. My American passport is a quarter-inch thick.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Because in those days, all those Iron Curtain countries, they would stamp you in. You had to go to the city that they gave you, that you had to go to. They would in and out of that city. They'd stamp you in, and then when you left, they'd stamp you out, and then they stamped you out of the country. So sometimes I'd get 3 or 4, and I rode in the Iron Curtain countries probably 17 or 18 times. So I got 4 or 5 stamps every time round trip, going in and out of the place. But like I said, I got there a year before the Berlin Wall was built. So when we used to go through Checkpoint Charlie and places like that, because we'd sleep in the eastern part if there was a race there, because it was cheap. They hadn't done any renovations on any of the stuff. The Russians were running it, and they didn't do any upgrades. Where the Americans and the British on the west side of the wall were building, new buildings and stuff from the war. And so we'd eat in West, because the food was terrible in the East, because 90% of it went to the Russian troops, because they were there. And it was a really locked down situation.
I can't imagine. I'm sure there were some sketchy moments, huh?
Oh, yeah. When first time they had me turn in my passport, scared the crap out of me, because I didn't know if I was going to get it back, And but they took them away from you every time, because if I explain to you what a passport now looks like, it's pretty finished. In those days, it was just a little book, had the little American logo on it, and the picture was glued on the page. Just a passport picture was an inch square or whatever.
A Polaroid just glued on.
Yeah, just glued on. You could have taken an X-Acto knife and slid it and taken it off. And so they'd make you turn in your passports. And they kept them at the police station until you left. And then when you got ready to leave, they'd give them back to you. But it really got me worried the first couple of times, because I didn't know if I was going to get it back.
Well, yeah, Eastern Bloc country like that.
Yeah.
They can kind of do whatever they want.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a scary feeling. And you were 20?
22.
Yeah. So young.
Yeah.
There's no cell phones.
Oh, no.
You don't know the country. You can't speak the language.
No,
I mean,
no.
I have a lot of respect for that, because that would be scary as hell, I feel like.
Well, that was another reason why I just decided I was going to do it, and I did it. Where, like I said, had a dozen friends that said, wait for me. And I said, no, I'll send you my address. And none of them ever made it.
Yeah, that's funny. And so the really interesting thing about this is you predated Lackey by almost a decade, right?
Yeah,
and he was really the first other American to...
Yeah, went over and stayed for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah.
In fact, he used to call me up and talk to me and ask me, hey, on this track, I got this track. And I said, well, this guy will bike. And I got to go know the promoters pretty good in the 4.5 years I was there. I rode a lot of races again and again and again.
Yeah.
So I knew these promoters and first name basis and all that kind of stuff. So I gave him a list of promoters the first couple times he called me, so he could have something to work off of. because he was in the blind, you know. And Danny LaPorte was the same way. He went over the same time Lackey did. Unfortunately, Danny won the 250 championship, but he never got any recognition because the 500 was so big, and Lackey got it all, and you know, Danny didn't get any. He got some recognition, obviously, but nothing like he would, like Lackey got.
He deserved more.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. No, he was a good rider. I remember Danny when I first started riding CMC. He was riding a Penton 125. He lived out in the desert somewhere, mother and dad.
Yucca Valley, right?
Yeah. And he was riding. I remember one night he slid underneath. He and Charlie Bauer were two Penton riders at the time. Okay. And they were having a duel at Lyons Drag Strip, and we were running night races there. And they both went around this one corner down at the far end of the track, and they both crashed or slid out, and they slid underneath the chain link fence. And I was one of the first guys to get down there because I was always in the infield area, walking around making sure everything was going okay. And I got down there and had to lift up the fence for them.
They were pinched under it?
Pinched underneath the chain link fence, so they couldn't, you know, it kind of got up. I lifted it up, they were able to drag their stuff out. But I ran into Charlie at, I haven't seen him in years. Charlie Bauer's living in Connecticut, his daughter.
Okay.
And we moved back there with the grandkids, he and his wife. And I went to, what you call it, oh God, brain fade, Bassani. He had the memorial.
Oh, yeah.
So I went there, and Charlie showed up. He hadn't been out on the West Coast. He thought it was kind of a old, you could see a lot of guys I hadn't seen in years. And he remembered when I helped him lift up the fence and pull his bike out from underneath it.
That's funny. So going back to those Grand Prix, tell me about what the scene was like. I mean, had to be different than anything you over here, right? It was way bigger. Motocross was already pretty well established by then.
Yeah, it was not not common at all, uncommon at all. I only rode 3 Grand Prix while I was there. I rode the French, the Swedish, and the East German because they were a downer for me. I wasn't that capable a rider. I mean, if Mark had gone to Europe after his career, you know, he would have been miles ahead of me because, you know, the bikes we rode were 350-pound, 400-pound motorcycles that had 2.5 inches of travel in the back and 3.5 or 4 inches in the front, and you know, you know, it was a totally different animal. I mean, as far as the tracks, I never rode. I ran a few rough scrambles. We call them rough scrambles over here, but there were nothing like what the motocross races were over there.
Was it kind of traditional motocross? I mean, hills and bumps.
They just staked it out. I never saw a tractor at any of them. In fact, some of the French tracks that ran yearly, they ran concrete down the hills. They just took a ready-mixed truck and went down there and poured the concrete down the hill to keep the hills from eroding away, and that way they didn't have to worry about washing out. But it was terrible on wheels.
Yeah.
And, you know, you go through a couple front wheels sometimes at one of the races, just, you know, square them because of the harsh conditions of jumping, you know, 10 or 12 feet down and landing on concrete. Jeez. But that was it. But there was, like I said, back in those days, the Iron Curtain countries really attracted a lot of riders. And they paid pretty good money. And when I first started going to East Germany, they would pay half in some European, like French francs or German marks. They would pay half in that and half in their crap. Their money didn't have any backing, so it was worth nothing. But I found out later at a bank, Barclays Bank in England, I could buy 25 to 1. If I gave them 1 West mark, they'd give me 25 East marks. And in Dusseldorf was a city in Germany that the Zeiss camera factory and Meisner China was there, and there was a couple other things. We used to buy binoculars, bridge binoculars, these great big binoculars, and take them back to England and sell them to the guys that had horses at the steeple race track.
Oh, okay.
The steeple tracks are 2.5 miles around. So on the far side, it got a long ways away.
Yeah.
And they didn't even import any kind of binoculars like big ones like that. These guys, you'd see them with their little opera kind of glasses,
Right.
holding them up. And we'd get up in the grandstand area and find out who the boss was from the driver down below, because they all were riding, had Rolls Royces and Bentleys and stuff like that with the driver. Because in Europe at that time, if you had one of those fancy cars, you had to have a driver. You couldn't drive the car yourself.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
That was just like a status thing?
Yeah, it was I guess a status thing, or a law, because they all had chauffeurs. Anyway, I'd, find out who the guy was, and that way I would go ahead and go up there and say, here, try these. And, I could see the fly on the back of the horse 2.5 miles across. And, oh, wow, how much? And we could sell them for sure, 200 or 300 100 pounds. A pound back in 1960s was worth almost $5 at that time. It was
really?
Quite a bit more than it is now. And the Swiss francs and the German marks were pretty much the same as they are now. Those two economies were really strong over there. And so they had no problem with that.
So what were you making on a set of binoculars? What would you pull in?
$400 or $500.
Jeez.
And, as far as, and
That's a lot of money back then, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Jeez.
Well, that was just like the races. That 1962 French Grand Prix. In fact, I got the results in one of those pieces of paper. When I first met Roger DeCoster and Joe Robert, everybody sold stuff. They were selling CZ chains. And I sold castor oil, the bean oil, and I sold rim locks.
Okay.
The ones that Dunlop made, the little metal thing with the bolt on it.
Yeah.
Well, in those days, if you didn't have rim locks, you had to use 5 or 6 self-tapping screws on each one of your rims to keep your tire from turning. And that had to be done. Otherwise, you'd rip the valve stems out.
Yeah.
So that was quite an ordeal because nobody had electric stuff. They just had a regular screwdriver that they put things in with.
That's not easy.
No, you had 6 on each wheel, on each side, one on each, on both sides.
Yeah.
And so it was quite a chore. So those rim locks sold like hotcakes. I bought 12 dozen at a time, 144. England's the only place in the world where 8 and 8 wasn't 16. It was 1 and 4pence. Their valuation of stuff was really crazy.
A little screwy.
But I get 144, I pay about 40 cents a piece for them and buying them in that box. And I could sell them for about $2.50 a piece. And I'd have a line, 30 guys off the back of my car until I ran out.
It's crazy that they wouldn't have that technology. I mean,
No, it was like I said, there was so much stuff that was, the Japanese were so, they copied everything. The first bikes that came over here were copies of Triumph and those first twin-cylinder Yamahas and stuff. They looked like an old Triumph or an old BSA 600 or 650. And they did a lot of stuff.
Well, the results here, this is interesting looking through this. What year did you say this was, 62? The French Grand Prix?
The dates on it.
Oh, 63.
Yeah.
Rolf Tiblin, Jeff Smith, Andre Couchard.
That was a who's who. That's why I only rode, like I said, 3 Grand Prix in the whole years I was there. The French, the Swedish, and the East German.
That's crazy.
Because the guys were just, a class above me. It'd be like a guy, a good intermediate rider, going out and signing up in the pro class at a race here.
So you were doing a lot of international events?
They were all international.
Okay.
Every one of them. They had like extra national. That first race in Bordeaux, France, extra national, they said. Well, that was great. All my buddies in England, the Aussies and South Africans, they were all considered rude colonials over there. They all came over to ride in England, because of the motocross. And they all said, "Oh, there's only four countries allowed in an extra national," and I was one of them. So there'd only be 3 other guys. Well, the 3 other guys, one of them was Rolf Tiblin, one was Dan Klink, who was the top rider in Holland, and another guy was Hezi Arnez, was a top French rider. And those were all the guys that I had to compete against. And you know, I had my lineman boots, in fact, Leslie Archer's dad, he was a famous rider over there, Les Archer. His dad, Jeffrey was his father's name. I got to know him really well. And he took a hacksaw and hacksawed grooves in the bottom of my boot so I could stay on the footrests.
Is that right?
Because it was so muddy, you know, the muddy race, it had been raining. But I used to ride a lot in Germany because they said if they hung the American flag up, they'd get 3,000 GIs to show up.
Oh, really?
Because there was nothing to do. It was peacetime army.
Yeah.
Guys were playing horseshoes and, you know, on a weekend, it was kind of cool. They could go drink beer and try to pick up on all the girls that were there. So it was a huge American. And I hit the ground probably, it had rained about 3 days out of the week before the race. So it was really slippery and muddy, and you had up and down these hills, and it was kind of a gravel pit type thing with rocks and everything loose. And I must hit the ground a dozen times. And they picked me back up and put me on the bike, and I would...
All the GIs?
GIs, they jump over the fence and do that. They're all in their fatigues or whatever, you know. They would pick me up and put me back on the bike and tell me to keep going. It was terrible.
You mentioned a race in the Eastern Bloc somewhere where you showed up and there was no track markers.
Oh, yeah, no fence, no barricades. It was in East Germany, one of the races I rode, and it was 2 days before the event. And I said to the promoter, most of the promoters spoke really good English. In fact, a lot of German people over there spoke really good English because they were in American concentration camps during the war.
Oh.
And they learned, you know, he said, the Americans, I got 3 squares a day, got a nice bed to sleep in. And I was some guys, they worked for officers back in those days, you know, they would get a job finding his shoes and doing his laundry and keeping track of the guy. And they'd learn English that way. And they learned English. That's how they learned English.
Jeez.
So I had this guy tell me that, you know, it was one of the best times of my life, you know. But the guy said to the guy, says, what are we going to do about fencing? He said, no problem, got a handle. And like I said earlier, 30 Army trucks showed up full of troops. They're all in their Sunday best, all with automatic weapons, and they just stood all the way around the track. Most of those were parade dress, you could say, but sometimes they put their arms through each other, you know, and 100,000 people showed up that day, and nobody crossed the track.
Yo, I would imagine not if you're staring down a machine gun.
No, but that was just some of the little incidences that happened, you know, and but they ended up the race went off without a hitch.
That's wild. And so we talked about Lackey coming a decade later. When did Mark Blackwell go?
Blackwell was in the 70s.
Okay.
He
so still about a decade later.
Yeah. He rode, and he was only riding the 250s.
Yeah.
He rode the 250 CZ. And he only did Grand Prix. He went over the idea of only doing Grand Prix.
Okay.
Mark was a fairly accomplished rider when he went over there. But, you know, like I said, I was so outclassed with those factory guys that were there with the bikes and with the riders and everything else. It was just a downer for me to do it. So I just didn't sign up. Yeah. I just passed. Only 3 races I rode. And the one reason I rode the Swiss Grand Prix, that was when I was over there during the time Bud was there, and in 1963 they were doing The Great Escape, the movie.
Okay, I heard about this.
So I hung out with Bud for about 2.5 months, and on the set was in Munich, Germany, southern Germany, which was a nice area, a really nice area. And that's where I met McQueen, James Garner, and Charles Bronson. And we used to go out to dinner together and hang out. And during my time that I went to work for Comerford's earlier, when I first got to England, I learned to ride a sidecar because we worked on them all the time. They were notorious for burning out clutches because of all the extra weight. 'Cause again, it was just a stock motorcycle, didn't do anything special. And they hung a big 200-pound sidecar on it, loaded up with the family and everything. And so it got to be, kind of a unique situation to ride a sidecar. And I could ride it in traffic. And so they had me all dialed into. I went out and showed them I could ride their sidecar with the one that they show in the Great Escape where they're chasing McQueen through the hills and stuff, and the guy's got a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on the thing. They dressed me up in the German uniform and everything. 3 times it happened, and 3 times they ran out of time. They were shooting other stuff. A movie just kind of runs on itself. I mean, if they didn't make it through the day, they'd say, okay, tomorrow, we'll do everything tomorrow.
Sit around and wait.
Yeah, sit around and wait. And but I had the helmet and the big trench coat and the boots and all that kind of stuff. I was going to ride the sidecar for him, and in the end, the Swedish Grand Prix was that week that they were shooting all that stuff. And I told Bud and those guys, I said, hey, on Wednesday, I got to leave. I got to go to Sweden. And I was driving my Volkswagen bus, because it was a chore to get there kind of thing. And so Paul was with me. And we were living with Bud at the time. He had some German or French, I don't know, a movie star that had a really nice apartment. And she was off making a movie somewhere. And so he was given that apartment because he was actually part of the movie, because he was the guy that did all the stunts and stuff and taught McQueen how to jump over that fence and a bunch of stuff they did. He did it first, and then McQueen was able to.
Oh, McQueen actually did it, though.
Yeah, he did it. He was accomplished.
Yeah, he was a good rider. Yeah.
He was part of the 6 Day. That was when 1964, when Bud called me. I was living in England at the time, and he said, hey, I need another guy for the 6 Day Trials team. He said, can you get a bike? And I said, yeah, I can get a Jawa. I still kept in contact with the people from Jawa in Czechoslovakia. And so I called them up and said, can I get a 250 ISDT bike? And they said, yeah. So I had the full factory bike with the air tank in the frame and everything, really the first class. And unfortunately, I got an air leak on the second day, and I was an hour late to the checkpoint, and so you're disqualified when you're an hour late. But that was the experience I had. They had McQueen, Cliff Coleman, Bud Eakins, Dave Eakins, Paul Hunt, and myself. And Paul and I were able to get Jawas because it was not only we were there, but that's when everybody had to pay their own way. Everybody did it on their own, and I didn't have any on the situation where they had to get your own bike too, and so I was in a position where I could get a bike, and so he said, "You're on the team," and so away I went, and I drove over there, carried my Gold Star in the trunk of my Mercedes. I was driving a Mercedes then, and Paul and I left and went and did the Swedish Grand Prix, and left early.
So you missed the shoot, huh?
Yeah, missed the shoot of doing it. I mean, I wasn't going to be paid anything. I was just doing it because I was there, and in those days things were pretty loose. I mean, I mean, Bud was making a good salary because he'd been everything was put together here in the States when they were talking about making the movie, and so he was part of the original people that were there.
Yeah.
So he could afford to live in this fancy apartment by himself. It was a big 3-bedroom thing, and so we all had our own bedrooms and hung out, but every night we went out to dinner, some German restaurant somewhere. I got to know Garner pretty good. Garner was exactly what he was, a really nice guy, down to earth. The McQueen, a little bit standoffish.
Was he?
But, I met him there, and but I was able to, we bunked in, we had to share rooms in they kicked it was a German army base. So they threw everybody out of the army base for that weekend and put all the 6 Day Trials people in there.
Okay.
And so each team was like a dorm in a college. It had one main room and then 2 bedrooms off the sides, one on one side, one on the other. So Paul and I and Bart Stewart and one of the other guys was in one, or 4 guys in each room. There was 8 of us all together. And then McQueen and the 2 Eakins brothers and Cliff Coleman was in the other room.
Okay.
And they'd have breakfast together and stuff like that. And then, like I said, I got to know them really well when we were doing this stuff when they were shooting the film.
Yeah. Did McQueen do well at 6 days? You remember?
No, he broke.
He broke. Seems like everyone broke. I mean,
No, but Dave got a silver medal. Dave, I think he did the best. Bud didn't make it either. They were all riding Triumphs.
Yeah.
And TR5s and TR6s.
That would almost be the strategy back then, is just get there, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't about even going super
Well,
fast.
no, and that was what was the beautiful part about it, was the fact that the guy that was our team manager was a well-known guy from England, big burly guy in the English motorcycle industry. I don't know what his position was, but they picked him because he spoke English and, that kind of stuff. And he was able to put together the package to where, and they were putting the guy, so I rode 3 people on the same time. 3 riders went off every day on the same time. And they had me with a gold medal guy from Sweden and a gold medal guy from England. So I had these 2 guys that they said, just stick with them. When they stop, you stop. When they go, you go, because I had no idea what we were doing. I mean, never rode at trials, never rode any enduros, never rode any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was working out good. I could keep up with them, no problem. And it wasn't a race. I mean, it was just, everybody. But they laid it out in the dry 8 months before, and it rained for 2 weeks before the 6-day trials that year.
Where were they?
East Germany.
Okay.
And it was and cobblestone streets and the mud, and man, you just slip and slide. Robert was kind of close to me. He was riding in the Belgium team, and he lost his exhaust pipe, but you can't leave it behind. You got to carry it with you. I mean, if it comes unbolted. Oh. And I remember him a couple times passing me with a pipe across his lap.
Bike's all loud.
Yeah, just blasting.
That's funny. How were you accepted over there? Was there any?
At first, I had a hard time because I was taking somebody's place.
Oh.
Because all the guys there, they're all making a living at it. I mean, everybody that I rode with was the idea that the racing was you made your living. The guys in England, we'd leave in March, the end of March every year, go ride the sand tracks in Belgium and Holland, because the ground was still frozen in a lot of places with snow. And then and I learned real quick from the Aussie guys that had been there before me, if you stayed out of the country for more than 8 months, they didn't tax you. So when I went back and worked in England at Comerford's, at the motorcycle place, I never had any tax taken out. All they would take out was 10 shillings a week from my socialized medicine, because they have medicine, like free medicine, for dental or for anything, doctors. And so that way I ended up, working for Comerford's for the 3 or 4 months that I was there. And I usually ended up redoing my bike or getting a new one. Like when I got the new Matchless Matisse, I had to get a Matchless motor and I had forks and shocks. I ended up running Ceriani forks and Ceriani shocks, because they were the best at that time, as far as the most travel.
But you weren't getting taxed, so you were keeping a good chunk of your money. And
oh yeah, I mean my pay packet. Yeah. I mean, I don't even remember what it was, to be honest, but it probably wasn't much when you stop and think about it back in that many years ago.
Yeah, probably not.
In the 60s here, you didn't pay. Or 50s, when I was working for Lockheed Space and Missiles, you had to be 18 years old. That was another thing. When I was growing up in the San Fernando Valley, to work in a regular job, you had to be 18. So I graduated when I was 17, so I had to wait 6 months. But I was doing irrigation of people's fruit trees and odd jobs, that I'd picked up over the years. That's how I could afford a motorcycle. And So I ended up doing that kind of work, and that's how I made my money. I had a water skiing boat and a motorcycle.
Those are your toys?
Those are my toys.
Did you, when you were in Europe, was the Husky Training Center a thing?
No.
That was down the road. Okay.
That was down the road. The Huskies, they had some kind of a training program in Sweden, for the Swedish riders. It was just like Lito and Headlands. There were 2 Swedish bikes, big 4-strokes. The Huskies were 2-strokes at the time. And they rode, they had a training program in Sweden for the Husqvarna crew, but it was never out of Sweden.
Okay. So what was the catalyst that kind of made you come home?
Well, I got married.
You met your wife over there?
Yeah, she was Swiss.
Oh, okay.
And Sandra was born over there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Sandra was born in Zurich. And in fact, she had we came back on the Queen Mary, not because it was a fancy boat, just because we could get 21 square feet per person of stuff. And we had a bunch of crystal, and we had some really nice china, and a lot of bedding and stuff, sheets and pillowcases and clothes. And so the 21 square feet per person was the whole reason why we picked the Queen Mary.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't, and it was only a 5-day trip. Moved pretty fast. One of the fastest ocean liners they ever had over there. They built it with the idea they could outrun the German submarines during the Second World War, and they used to carry the troops. A lot of American troops went from New York
on the Queen Mary,
to England.
I didn't know that.
They used it as a troop carrier back in the day.
You ever go visit it?
I actually went and found our room that we were in. Yeah, the little like a 2 bunk beds, and we had Sandra was in a bassinet at the time, and she had her 6-month anniversary on the boat.
Is that right?
They had a big party. I mean, they said anything to break the monotony because the crew was bored spitless,
it wasn't like a modern cruise. I mean,
they just back and forth. 5 days from Dover, England to New York.
Yeah.
And 5 days back, and they just turned around and went back. So anyway, they had a big party and cake and everything, and it was pretty cool. But to regress, when I went over there on the North Lloyd's, a German boat, again, I just picked the boat because it was one of the cheapest ways to get there. And there was over 1,000 passengers. It was one of the roughest crossings they ever have. I still got all the stuff from the boat. They gave you a whole packet of the storms and everything. It was the worst crossing back at that time. And they had, like I said, 1,000 passengers. And there was only about 8 of us that weren't seasick.
Is that right?
And
even a ship that big was still pitching and
rocking and rolling.
Wow.
And the props would come out of the water. And those props are, bigger than this room. I mean, higher, 12, 14 feet tall. And the vibration would vibrate. They had mirrors on the boat, a lot of the walkways and stuff had big wall mirrors. And they'd shake. I mean, we thought, man, they're going to break for sure, but they never broke. They vibrate. But everybody, all you could smell was puke everywhere.
Oh, really?
And but we had a half a dozen people. And when we went to dinner, we had our own waiter. Each person had their own waiter because it was made up where you would normally go a couple sessions, and then one waiter would have a whole table, 10 or 12 people.
But everybody was sick.
And the waiters were all board staff. And so we had a waiter per person. So when we went to dinner, there were 5 of us eating dinner. There was 5 waiters waiting on the table.
Jeez.
Which was kind of cool. And then the bartenders would buy us drinks because we were the only ones in the bar at night.
Were you ever scared? Like, do you ever think this thing's going to sink?
No.
No?
Never crossed my mind. I was maybe too naive or whatever, but, and then when we came back on the Queen Mary, it was one of those, in October of 65, it was placid. I mean, it just looked like a big, giant sheet.
Well, and again, that's the sister ship to the Titanic. Did you ever go, man, hope we don't hit an iceberg?
No. That was built in England, and the Titanic was built in the United States.
Oh, okay.
They weren't sister ships.
Oh, I thought they were.
No.
Oh, okay.
But no, but it had like I said, 5 days. Took us almost 9 days in Miss Berlin because it was so rough.
Jeez, that's wild. Those stories are great to me, man. That's just experiences that most people never have.
That's right. I was just like rebuilding my motor in my Volkswagen bus. I did that twice.
Did you? Over there?
Drop a valve, driving through France to a race, pull over the side of the road. I had a whiskey box that I could slide underneath the van and 4 bolts and 2 cables, and I'd just push the van by myself 5 feet up, and the motor was sitting on the box. They're all air-cooled.
Yeah.
And the whiskey box was a perfect height. And then I'd take the motor apart, figure out what I needed, and hitchhike to the local town. Every town in Europe in those days had a Volkswagen dealership,
right,
or a parts place, and I'd get the parts because I'd have all the broken parts with me, and I could match them all up, and I'd go back and sit on the side of the road and put the motor back together and drive on. But that happened twice. Happened to Hoppy about 4 times. Because he used to run the shit out of his van and over-rev it all the time and drop a valve. But that was just stuff that you automatically did. I mean, it wasn't something that, because I didn't have a team or I couldn't call anybody. I was like my mom. I didn't realize it at the time. But she finally sent me a telegram or something, wanting to know if I was still alive. Because it'd been like 4 months since I'd left, and there was no phones or, nothing, no way of contacting you.
All right.
And I never took any pictures, which I'm kind of sad about that now. I could have, now with the cell phones and all that kind of crap, you could have had a great library of pictures for the whole trip. I used to buy postcards. I'd just stop at some place, and where's your postcard rack? And they'd point over there, and I'd pick out of the area I was at, I'd pick out 2 or 3 postcards and send them. I had my sister and my mom and a couple other people that I'd send a postcard to. So I'd just scribble out a postcard, having a great time, blah, 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 still riding races.
Still alive.
Yeah. I had a cracked tailbone. That was the only bad thing that ever happened to me, and that was really painful. I had to get one of those little donuts to put a kid in, to put in the seat of the car to sit on it because you couldn't drive. Oh man, that was terrible. But that was the only incident I had over there. Really lucky in that case because, I remember some of those guys got really screwed up. That Swedish Grand Prix again, it was a muddy race, and it was one of those ones that was so muddy that on the straightaways, when the bikes went through, the mud would come back.
Oh yeah, it would just fill back in.
And but I finished, and
with the help of the GIs picking you up.
No, that was in Sweden, and it was only in France and Germany that we used to get a lot of GIs because that's where that's where all the big American Army bases were in France and Germany.
Okay, so and you did you have a Jawa factory ride while you were there ever, or that was just over here?
Over here.
Okay,
just the 4 of us.
Okay, so any other stories from Europe that kind of stand out to you in that whole time over there? I can't even imagine the experience. Okay, and it is a shame you don't have photos because
I know. There was Tetero. It was a thing that everybody was so proud of over there. Hitler had gone there and had watched the race at Tetero back in the 30s when he was coming up in power. And it was a grass track, which I had my Gold Star geared for 124 miles an hour.
Jeez. And
it would float the valves going down this downhill straightaway. It was, you were doing close to 100 miles an hour. And you just hung on because at that speed and going, and a 4-stroke motor, the bike would want to loop out. It was when you're floating through the air, the momentum of the wheels spinning and everything would want to pull you over backwards. So you had to hang way over the handlebars to keep the thing straight. Anyway, I broke a wheel, and I didn't, and I was having a real hard time coming up with a wheel. And I met a guy. I'd met him the year before because I rode Tetero about 4 times It was a fun race to ride. They paid well, and it was just an experience. A grass track over there was something that they would only run once a year. And the grass would grow, and they'd mow it. It was all mowed. All the speedway riders, Don Godden, Spud Tatum, those were all guys back from the 50s and 60s that were heroes in England. They all took up grass track. I got to know those guys really well, too, because we were all riding grass track. And my Gold Star, I put a GP carburetor on it, put Speedway tires. The Speedway tire has a full radius. The sidewalls have got tread on them.
Okay,
on the Speedway tire.
Yeah.
And so I'd run Barham tires, which was made in Czechoslovakia, and I would put those on front and back, and then I would run the GP carburetor and the gearing and alcohol. We just take we were so crude. I mean, we didn't have any idea of jetting, so we just took the jets out of the carburetor and just ran the alcohol because everything was full on. I mean, wide open. And that Gold Star, I had the S&W valve springs and some S&W cams that I'd bought here in the United States.
Okay. And
shipped them over there, and and I bolted them in the bike, and it made the bike really, really fast. I mean, there was 2 or 3 times I got hole shots on the bike, but I knew that I would be stupid to try to continue. I'd wait for a couple of the heroes to pass me, then I'd just fall in behind them.
Yeah.
And
so you're running alcohol. Doesn't that stuff burn off really quickly?
Well, yeah, but a full tank would last for a heat race and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. But that's what we had to do that to compete with the Japs because they had the JAPs, the speedway bikes, and a grass track speedway bike. But I had the advantage. I had brakes. They didn't. And or their brakes were a little 5-inch thing with a 1/2-inch wide, which you could drag your feet and make more of a thing there. But I ended up, I discovered the 7R wheels. They were made of magnesium because a Gold Star QD wheel on a stock Gold Star weighed 82 pounds. Jeez. With the brake and the drum and everything, the spline. It was a quick change, so I had a spline. I got rid of all that crap, threw it away, and we put those magnesium 7R wheels on.
Was that a road wheel?
Road racing.
Yeah.
8-inch by 3-inch. So it was like putting an anchor out. I mean, you really would stop.
Huh.
And they were light. They only weighed like 35, 36 pounds for a wheel. And
gosh, that's a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. And the brakes. I mean, the brake you took off was a piece of crap, and so you ended up putting something that really would stop you. So, because when I had my matchless Matisse, I was so proud of the fact that the bike weighed under 300 pounds, just under 300 pounds, because I had 7R wheels on it and Cherryani forks and Cherryani shocks.
That's crazy. Your van probably weighed almost that much.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Any regrets about your time over there, or kind of what's your final takeaway when you look back on your time in Europe?
I wish I could have stayed longer. My motivation for going home wasn't me, it was my parents and my wife's parents, because Sandra was born, and Sandra was 6 months old there. I guess she had her 6-month anniversary on the Queen Mary. They said, "Well, you got a baby now," and and I said, "Oh, hey, I had a late model Mercedes diesel and trailer with my bike, and had a whole bunch of races, and I just met a guy, an English guy, that was a couple notches higher than I was as far as riding ability. Arthur Harris was his name. He lived on the coast in England, down in an area just outside the coast area, and he ended up. He was going to be He was going to be my teammate, and he rode Triumph. He had a custom Triumph thing, and so we were both going to ride as a team. And we already put our letterheads together, and we were just rocking and rolling, and we were going to go out and do another time. And I got so much crap from my mom and dad, or my father had passed, but my mom and her parents. her mother and father.
Were they American?
No, Swiss.
Okay. But they just didn't want you racing anymore?
Well, yeah, no, they just said you're going to be a vagabond the rest of your life, kind of thing. What are you going to do? You got a little girl now, and you got her married, and you got to do all the right things. But anyway, so I sold everything. I really worked out well. A Canadian guy, which I never met until he came, he'd called me and said, "Hey, I heard you're going to go home." And I go, "Yeah." He says, "You got a Mercedes diesel, right? And you got a trailer?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I want to buy all this stuff from you." So over the phone, we made the deal. And he showed up with a pocket full of money, and I sold him the car and gave him the trailer, and he went on his way.
Yeah. And he stayed and raced then?
I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah.
I lost total track of him, and I don't think he performed very well. A lot of people, a couple other Americans I ran into who were over there, but they just had such a downer. I mean, it was a muddy race. I mean, because of rain or shine. I mean, that East German Grand Prix was to the point where, you took the front fender off because it was clogging the wheel. I mean, the mud was building up.
Yeah. And
you just learned to roll with the punches.
Yeah. And
the food was different over there too. I mean, it was totally different kind of food. I mean, to where, like the burgers and whatever you eat over here, I just adapted perfectly. First year we were there, I didn't have a stove, so I always bought a lot of French cheese. So you had a lot of dry meat, the salami and stuff like that, and French bread, those big baguettes of French bread. And I'd buy a couple of those in the morning and a bunch of cheese, and that'd last me through the day, cheese sandwiches and ham sandwiches, and I mean, you just work your way along.
Croque Monsieur, right? Was that what they called them, ham and cheese?
Yeah.
And so, how did you meet your wife before we leave to Europe?
I had a friend of mine, Max Morf, who was the Swiss champion for several years. He was a factory CZ rider right from the factory. He had a 360 and a 250, and he rode both classes. I ended up meeting him just out of the blue. We hit it off right away, bang. Just one of those deals where, he spoke pretty good English, and his dad had a big farm, and that was the trick thing. The guys like Johnny Draper, Leslie Archer, John Banks, Smithy, I think, had an uncle or something. They all had farms. Well, that gave you your own possibility of having your own racetrack.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have it. There was no open land.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing. And he had this area where his dad owned a big farm right outside of Zurich. In fact, it was in Cloten, which is where the international airport is, and the airplanes used to fly over his house. And we hit it off. So I went there and was living with him. And he had a big barn it had a whole 1/4 of the barn. It was all set up with a house, kitchen and bathroom and everything. And we could go out and practice every day because we had a track right out the back. Mm. And in fact, guys like Tiblin and Orleaf Hansen, Smith, a lot of guys would stop at his track because they knew he had a neat track and they could test stuff. Because like if you put a new clutch in back in the day, all this stuff was cork and you had to press it into these little squares. It was a really agricultural compared to what stuff is they have now.
Yeah.
And you wanted to test it out before you load up your bike and headed off the road to some place. Right. And that was another thing. I discovered quickly that boring a motorcycle in Europe, a single-cylinder Gold Star 500cc, was impossible. Everybody had a boring bar, but they were for mopeds. So nobody had a boring bar that would fit. So I got the idea through this Hoppy guy. He was a pretty smart dude. He said, Porsche. And he'd found out where the hard chrome place was in Germany. We sent our cylinders there and had them hard chromed. And that way I never had to bore the bike the whole time when I had the Gold Star.
And they did that at Porsche, you said?
No, it was Porsche had that engineering stuff. No, it was a company that did it in Germany.
Oh, okay.
So we just sent the cylinders off and they hard chromed them.
Huh.
And then we didn't have to never bore them. You just is stock. We just have to, so we carry a couple stock pistons with us.
Problem solved.
Yeah. So it worked out great.
Interesting. All right. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. I want to talk about how CMC got started.
Sure.
Kind of this is where I met you, in the mid-'80s, coming over to do those races. So stay tuned. This is your Troy Lee Designs Timeout. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back here with more Stu Peters.
There's a new product on the market that's going to help you with your riding and racing, and it's Elevate Action Sports. If you've not yet gone and checked it out at elevateactionsports.com, it's a collective of riding coaches, the likes of which has never been put together. Grant Langston, Ryan Hughes, Jeff Emick, Johnny Campbell, and myself, David Pingree, bringing all of our years of experience in professional racing to one place with professionally produced videos and all kinds of supporting staff to help you with your mental side of racing, your physical side, your bike setup, your bike maintenance. We cover it all. Get to Elevate Action Sports right now and join the community.
Dunlop. There is a reason every AMA championship in the past decade was won on Dunlop tires. They are the best. Choose the best performing tire and a brand that has never wavered in their support of our sport. Choose Dunlop. Pro Circuit. Pro Circuit products are designed with one goal in mind: winning. Through passion and hard work, Pro Circuit has operated the most successful 250 team in the history of the sport. They use that same formula when developing exhaust, engine, and suspension parts for every brand. When only the highest level of performance is acceptable, trust Pro Circuit.
Since 2009, Seat Concepts has been dedicated to making the best aftermarket seats. More comfort, more grip, more riding. For 10 years, we've continued to raise the bar. Innovation and American craftsmanship make Seat Concepts the world-leading manufacturer of power sports seats.
Something from nothing. That's what Nihilo Concepts is about. It starts with a spark, an idea, a concept, which leads to a design, and finishes with engineered excellence with the highest quality products created with durability in mind. All our products are made in the USA at our state-of-the-art facility in Stuart, Florida. Whether you are a weekend warrior, ride for fun, or at the highest level of competition, Nihilo Concepts offers innovative titanium, aluminum, and carbon fiber parts for your dirt bike. We offer a wide variety of products that you can customize to your liking. Browse our site for foot pegs, brake tips, engine components, specialty tools, frame grip tape, lever grips, carbon fiber components, motor stands, our secondary on-switch, plus much more. Head to NihiloConcepts.com and see for yourself why factory teams like Red Bull KTM, Rockstar Husqvarna, Troy Lee Designs Gas, Orange Brigade, Club MX, KLM Gas, and some of the fastest riders in the world choose Nihilo Concepts.
Specialized Bicycles. Specialized leads the way in the world of bicycling. Whether it's cross-country racing, downhill, e-bikes, enduro, road, gravel, dual slalom, dirt jumping, or all mountain bikes that do it all, Specialized has the perfect ride for you. The brand is synonymous with engineering excellence and innovation that steers the industry. Visit your local Specialized dealer for a test ride and see just how good Specialized products are.
Try to keep on keeping on.
With a rich history in motocross, ProX has been dedicated to supplying quality components since 1975. Whether you're rebuilding an engine or just need a new chain, ProX Racing Parts aims to bridge the gap between OE quality and affordability. ProX has over 9,000 part numbers and over 60 different product types that are manufactured by highly reputable or even OEM suppliers and are offered at affordable prices to help keep riders on the bike instead of in the garage. Visit ProX.com to search parts for your bike or check them out at your favorite online or local dealer.
A lot of us have been talking about the Stasic generation of riders, and you forget how quickly things can change in a sport that is as young as motocross. That's 6-7 years that these bikes have been around training riders. So we have a Stasic generation out on the racetrack. A lot of those riders surely were raised on Stasics, and the skills they show are next level. All the things that coaches have been teaching riders on larger motorcycles for decades, they're doing it younger than ever, and it's hard to believe the Stasic generation is already here.
Hey guys, I want to share one of our new partners here, Ketone IQ. If you guys are not familiar with this product, it is basically just a very easily absorbed, bioavailable fuel. No caffeine, no sugar in it. Prior to riding, prior to doing any kind of work, this stuff will really change your mental focus, your endurance. If you maybe aren't eating a big breakfast before you go ride, which is the case for me. I don't like to have a bunch of food in my stomach when I go ride. So these make sure I've got energy stores ready to go. It's easily pulled, and I really noticed the mental focus. A lot of endurance athletes are on this stuff, whether it's Tour de France guys, triathletes, anyone that's got to have sustained performance over a long period of time. It was developed for our military out in the field when they couldn't access good food to keep them fueled up and operating at a high level. So check this out. We have a 30% discount code. If you go to, you look at the link in our bio, go to our Instagram page, you can find it, but it's hvmn.com/WTM. It's 30% off. So try it. Like I said, lots of guys on this, lots of moto guys in the professional class using this as a supplement and just a slight advantage on folks who are maybe hitting the wall a little bit. So Ketone IQ, and they now make it with caffeine. So if you want to add a little bit of boost to it, you can. Great stuff. Check them out. Welcome back, folks. That was your Troy Lee Designs timeout, and we're stoked to have those guys as a part of the show going way back to the beginning. And if you guys are not familiar with all of the products that they've got, new motocross line is out, mountain bike line, the paint department, casual wear, so check out TroyLeeDesigns.com. Okay, so you come back, Stu, to the U.S., and what's the first thing you do? I mean, you kind of having to start over here because
yeah.
I mean, tell me what happens.
Okay. We arrived, well, let me go back and finish the story and meet my wife and when we got married.
Okay.
I was living with Max Morf, and a friend of his that Max knew came from a very wealthy Swiss family. He was going to a college in Zurich studying to be a doctor, and it was an international college. So it was one of those colleges we had to learn to speak. They spoke English, and most of the classes were in English, but then German too. But anyway, he was just casually talking to a group of his friends, which she was one of them. Said, "Oh, I got this American buddy of mine, and blah blah blah. He's over here racing a motorcycle." And so she made some comment. "Oh, I'd like to meet him." So he says, "Okay, we'll set you up." So he called me up and said, "Hey, show up to Max's house, wear something presentable," and because we wear the same clothes day in and day out, as far as when we were traveling, especially when we were traveling. And so I met her, and we decided we'd go to the movies, and we went to the movies and had a nice date, and I brought her home. And she introduced me to her folks. I brought her back on Sunday morning, and they thought that I was going to this American college. They didn't know that I was a motocross guy. Her dad was a professor in the University of Zurich, had been in that position for a number of years. 13 languages he could read, write, and speak.
Jeez.
Traveling with him was a breeze. But anyway, we ended up, I met her. Went to the movies. I think we went twice to the movies. Then I said, "Well, I got a bunch of races in the south of France, so I'll see ya." So I left, and I never got back till the next year, as far as to Zurich.
Okay.
I mean, full time, where I could kind of. So I called her up again, and we met, and had over a year's period of time, and then we decided we decided we were going to get married, and her folks said, "Oh, this is good," blah blah blah, and so we got married the 1st of October. I had to sign up. In those days, you had to take a blood test because the AIDS.
Oh, really?
Was really, really prevalent in Europe and places like Sweden and Holland, stuff where there was a lot of gays. They had a big outcry of AIDS. And so blood tests, and they had to wait for, took a bunch of tests, and had to wait for all of them to come back. And we were both clear, so we didn't have any problems. So we went to the courthouse, and Max and his wife, at that time, he was my best man, and you had to have two witnesses kind of thing. So they were the two witnesses. So we got married at that point. And like I said, it was the 1st of October, 1964. And then when we decided at the time, when we started getting the hassles with both our parents, that's when we ended up leaving, selling everything and climbing on the boat. When we got to New York, it was in late October, 65. I just went through the old phone book in the hotel we were staying, and car dealerships, and this one had a big ad. It was Buick, General Motors, Buick Cadillac dealership, and in downtown New York. So I called them up on the phone, and they said, "Yeah, we got a bunch of used cars down here." Okay, so I got a taxi and went to the dealership. And it was all underground. They had some windows in front. They had a couple cars in the windows in front, like on the main street, main street there. But everything was underground as far as the storage and the used cars and all the mechanics and stuff, because the stuff was so expensive above ground in New York. And so I whittled it down to the point where I had a Volvo station wagon, or I had a Buick. The Buick was a 1961, had the big fins on it, with big round tail lights in the back, with a like a
spaceship.
Yeah. And we picked the Buick because we had dishes and stuff that we brought with us, like I say on the Queen Mary, that was already there. A lot of breakable stuff we brought with us, and it all survived. And so we ended up buying the Buick, paid cash for it. Found out that I'd have to get the thing, some kind of registration, but the guy in New York, they were giving us a hassle because we were going to have to wait so long to get this registration done. So the salesman wanted to sell the car, and he was trying to help me out. We hit it off pretty good as far as talking. And he said, "Hey, we'll get the car licensed in New Jersey. And so we'll put New Jersey license plates on it, and you will, solve that problem." So we ended up getting New Jersey license plates on it, and we left New York with the bassinet behind the seat. Being a station wagon, we could fold the back seats down, a flat area, put all the breakable stuff and the linens and stuff, our sheets and towels and stuff that we brought with us, and headed off. Marina had packed a full suitcase, a medium-sized suitcase full of baby formula. In this day and age, they'd probably sift it thinking you were trying to bring in drugs or something.
Right.
And because she didn't want Sandra to have to, we'd have to change diet on her, with her formula.
Right.
So we bought the suitcase full. It lasted for the whole trip, and for a month or two afterwards, we're still giving her the same formula. Anyway, so we took off, and I went to the Automobile Club in New York, and they said, "Okay, just follow a yellow brick road." The guy took a yellow marker, those big books, map books you got from the Auto Club back in those days.
Atlas or whatever.
Yeah, the Atlas things. And Route 66. That was it, all the way across. So we followed Route 66 all the way back to Woodland Hills. I went back to Paul Hunt's, his mom and dad, Olin and Paul. They lived behind the golf course in the Woodland Hills Country Club in Woodland Hills. They had a house back tucked in in the canyon there. And we stayed there for about 3 weeks. And then Preston Petty, mom and dad, they had a beautiful home with a big fancy pool and a pool house, a 2-bedroom with kitchen and bath and everything, pool house. So he'd already asked his dad if I could stay there. And he says, yeah, if he works for me. And when he had a ride-em lawnmower, that's how much grass he had, on the whole top of the hill. Because when he bought the property, he just said, cut the top of that hill off and build me a house. His father, Eldine Petty, was one of the largest attorneys at that time in California. He had 300 attorneys working for him. Had the 27th and 28th floor of the Union Bank building in downtown L.A. The whole floors in Union Bank. And he did General Motors. He had 2 or 3 automobile companies and a bunch of stuff. But anyway, they were really wealthy. Preston grew up with a gold spoon in his mouth. And I
didn't know that.
Yeah, but anyway.
So what were you doing? Just yard work around his place? Or?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's ride-em lawnmower, flower beds. But my wife had been a hairdresser. She decided she wasn't going to go to college. You either went to college or you went to a school to learn a trade at that time. So she told her mom and dad, I want to go learn a trade. They said, what do you want to be? She wanted to be a hairdresser. So she went to 1,800 hours. It was the same here, and Switzerland was the same. Learning to dye the hair, bleach the hair, and cut it, and all that kind of stuff. A couple of years of that. And she was working at a hairdressing place when I met her. And so Mrs. Petty, when she found out she was a hairdresser, wow, she got my own private hairdresser. So we were in. And so she ended up making quite a bit of money. We bought 2 or 3 of those little headsets, the little cone thing you set on your head, the women.
Yeah.
You buy at Sears. And we had 2 or 3 of those. And so she had a little business going on the side of hairdressing because Bonnie Petty was alive at that time, Preston's older sister. And her friends were all we go to the beauty parlor there, private deal. So it worked out really well that way.
Built up a clientele real quick.
Yeah, and that's where Marina learned to drive a car. I took her to a Sears driving school. They had Sears Roebuck's driving. So I called him on the phone and I said, hey, I need an instructor. And he says, what do you got? And I said, I got this 61 Buick Invicta. He said, okay. So she learned to drive in Woodland Hills, in the hills of Woodland Hills, and that's where because she wasn't driving a car before when she was in Switzerland. She was 21 when I was 25.
When you guys came back?
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, it'd be cool if you had that car today, huh?
Oh, yeah. Actually, we kept it for a while. I was kind of sad when we sold it, and the thing ran perfect. We used a half a quart of oil in 3,300 miles.
Is that right?
Half a quart. That was it. Yeah. A big old V8, no air conditioning. Didn't have air, but it had all electric windows and stuff in it, and it was immaculate. The guy, the salesman, told me, whether it was true or false, a black couple owned it. They never drove it in the wintertime. There was no rust on it anywhere in New York. They stored it. They had the storage areas in this dealership. They bought the car brand new from them. They said, well, as long as you bought the car from us, we'll let you store it in the wintertime. So they brought it around, September and October and put it in until March every year.
That 55 to 65 window was the coolest looking cars, I think, for me.
Yeah.
Just lots of character, like you said, big fins and bullet lights. And
huge, flat. The only thing is about 70 miles an hour, the thing would kind of float a little bit.
Yeah.
They didn't have the greatest suspension. But anyway, we drove that back to California and kept it for about a year or two. And then we traded it in, got that Thunderbird. Remember, Mark had the maroon Thunderbird with a black Landau top. And she drove that for a while. Then we traded it in on a Mark III or Mark II Lincoln Continentals. Remember when they came out with that Lincoln?
Oh, yeah.
Had the nice, the big old spare tire in the back, the kit.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful car, 70s and early 70s. And we drove that thing to San Francisco, took it all over the place, family trips. Had a big 460 in it. Of course, in those days, there was no smog.
Yeah.
So things ran great.
Burned fuel like crazy, probably. Huh?
Oh, yeah, but I mean, not as long as you didn't bury your foot in it, you were okay.
Yeah. Okay, I want to get started here on what came next, but I do want to hit this story. Mark was telling us at the break about a guy whose foot pegs broke off.
Oh, okay.
Tell me this story, because this sounds terrible.
Okay. Well, Max and I got a ride out in the south of France, Marseille or someplace in that area, motocross. So we trucked down together, but we had separate cars. He left from someplace, and we met down in France. It was a motocross event, and the first moto, his foot peg broke, and they had steel tanks on those CZs back at that time, and he landed on that thing and just absolutely had blood clot that was huge, and his stomach and his lower body was all black and blue, and his balls were 6 inches in diameter, and he was in terrible pain. And they took him to the hospital. Well, the next moto, in those days they ran 3 motos. The second moto, my brake pedal, the cable came off into the first corner, and I hit a tree, and they thought I broke my leg or broke my ankle. So they bundled me up and sent me to the same hospital. So he was already there in the hospital, and they pulled me in. So we were in bed side by side, and that's when the doctor said the only way we were going to get the blood out of there is put this little stainless steel rod down the center of his penis, and he did, and the blood just shot to the ceiling. Like I said, it was a corrugated, I remember it well, it was one of those corrugated like a schoolhouse has, those corrugated with little holes in it, ceiling with the fluorescent lights, and it splattered all over the ceiling and all over the floor and made a hell of a mess. And anyway, the poor bastard. Pardon me. Anyway.
Was he yelling and screaming?
Oh, yeah. He was in total pain. I mean, they were jamming this thing down there. And he ended up staying in the hospital for about 2 more days. They let me out when they took the x-rays and found out nothing was fractured. I just had a big swollen ankle, black and blue kind of thing. And then we drove back to Switzerland together. But, man, he had to stop about every 4 or 5 hours because he was still having a terrible time with that thing. But that was worst.
You said his belly was almost looked like he was pregnant.
Yeah.
Just full of blood.
Had that just big blood clot there. Everything had just backed up.
That's terrible. Okay, so tell me, you're back here now. You're with Preston Petty, living at their place.
Yep.
What kind of came next for you?
Okay, I went to work for Andy Kobe. It was Kobe Cycle Sales in Woodland Hills there, and right on Ventura Boulevard, as a mechanic. And I was the only guy that they had that had a lot of experience changing tires. Everybody, his mechanics he had then, they'd use 2 or 3 tubes to fix one tire because it kept pinching them.
Okay.
Well, I actually trained for the 6-day trials where I could change a tire, take the tire off, put a tube in, put the tire back on in less than 5 minutes. I actually worked at that to get, so I felt I was kind of sufficient on doing that. Only had 1 flat tire that time, which I got fixed no problem during the trials. But anyway, I ended up being the only guy. So there'd be 10 guys that would bring their wheels in on Saturday to have a new tire put on for Sunday. And down there, they were all sponsored by him or getting some kind of a deal on parts and bikes and stuff. And he had a big crew of guys riding Indian Dunes and all over Southern California. So I'd get all those tires. And so every Saturday, I'd be changing 10 or 12 tires. But I could do it good and then didn't have to screw up a bunch of tubes and I could do it in one time and didn't pinch them. But those guys were trying to use those full-size tire irons, and I had those little Dunlop ones that were like little spoons.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And then I ended up, a friend of mine that during high school, besides working for Bud, I worked for this good friend of mine, Richard Diet. His dad was the third largest beekeeper in the state of California. Had hundreds of thousands of bees, and had 2 big 24-foot long bed trucks. We used to stack them 8 high, the hives 8 high and all 24 feet long. You put several hundred hives on at a time, take them up to Bakersfield, put them out in the alfalfa fields and along 5 there. And then the bees would make the honey, and we'd go back there and collect all the hives. And then, but not being afraid of bees, he put me to work in the warehouse because there was hundreds of bees flying around all the time. So you just move slow, and if you wanted to wipe them off your body, you just kind of gently pushed away.
So you weren't wearing a suit or anything?
No.
Jeez.
I couldn't. It was 90 degrees in there.
Yeah.
Plus wearing a suit, you'd have died. And so I worked there for probably 6 months. He paid me okay, I don't know, 10 or $12 an hour or something like that. And I was living for free. We lasted about 7 months at the Petties.
Okay. And then what?
Then we moved. I got a job at Pan Steel. It was an aerospace company. I worked on the Apollo programs, the very first ones. They were building all the tanks, the pressure vessels for the Apollo program that they ended up going to the moon with it. And so I was in charge of 3 or 4 of these tanks because they found out when they shot those things up into space that most of the instruments wouldn't work in a vacuum. So they had to put oxygen or nitrogen, some kind of a gas to them, and those tanks were filled up with those things, and that's what ran the instruments. So I worked there for about 4 years.
So no more racing when you came home?
No, I rode one race, the Hopetown Grand Prix again. Dave Eakins was working for Bud then. He was at Bud's place, and he had a matchless 500cc matchless scrambler. And he said, Stu, you can ride that bike if you want. And I signed up for the race, for the Hopetown race, because the last time I'd ridden it was back in the early 60s on a Honda for Kobe. And the first corner, we crashed. 3 or 4 of us went together and crashed, and it broke the triple clamp. So I was done. I never made it past the first corner. And that was it. But then I wasn't riding any bikes at all at that time until later when the Mako guy called me up. He was down in Burbank, and Frank Cooper was the Mako Norton distributor for California. And he offered a ride, so I rode a 360 Mako for him. And but I only rode 2 or 3 CMC races because then the races got so big that I was too busy putting the races on. I couldn't ride anymore. So
all right, so take us into that. How you partnered with Kelvin Franks, who you were
we
right?
were buddies in England, and the whole time we were there, we were in contact with each other. And so we decided we'd run motocross. So we got a gal to type us a press release. We wrote it out for her, and she typed it all up. And that's when Shavlik, that was his name. He was been the LA Times sports guy for about 20 years. And before that. So he called me and said, Stu, what is this word motocross? Because we put motocross in it. And I explained to him it's over natural hills and dales, and it's got the natural bumps, and it's nothing graded. He said, oh, okay. So when we sent the first, he was really good about putting our press releases in the LA Times every time. And for the whole time we were running, in the early days, we were running those races. So that was what ended up putting those races on. And we decided, okay, we're going to run some races. So then a guy told me, there's a guy named Larry Grismer. He lives down in Carlsbad, and he runs a track down there called Carlsbad Raceway. And he got a bunch of hills, and you ought to talk to him. As soon as he said a bunch of hills, I went, okay, I'm there. So I met him at his real estate office at night, and I drove there. Marina and I drove there and met him, and he was in his office in Costa Mesa, right there on one of the main streets there, Baker. I remember it was off of Baker or something. There's a street there, Baker, in Costa Mesa. And he had a small little office about the size of this. And he was a commercial real estate broker because he was into flying. So he flew all his clients. There were guys that would come in from New York and say, I want to buy 2,000 acres in the San Joaquin Valley, but I want to see it. So he could fly him up there and do it all in one day, where if you drove, it'd take a couple of days.
Sure.
So he said, come on, I'll meet you down there. He gave me the directions. I went down there, drove down there, Marina and I, and spent a day walking around Carlsbad Raceway. There was the drag strip down the middle, and he had a little oval track behind the drag strip, which a couple of speedway guys were renting from him or something. But he had all these hills, and I went, wow, perfect. And he said, I can't even park cars on it on a busy drag strip at night, spectator cars. So I said, okay. So Calvin and I went down there, spent 2 days chopping weeds, putting stakes in the ground, bought a whole bunch of that lath, 3-foot laths, and called up. That was my first experience of calling up Suzuki and Yamaha. Toshi Koyama was the manager, and Kenny, what was Kenny's last name? Oh, well, anyway, I'll think about it. Kenny
Kenny Alexander? Not Kenny Alexander. No, I know who you're talking
Pat
about.
Alexander was at Suzuki for years. Kenny Clark.
Kenny Clark, that's right.
He was the Yamaha guy. He did everything. Now it's all separated. He did road racing, motocross, trials, desert, whatever he did. He was in charge of motorcycles, period. So they sent us boxes of banners. They said, oh, you're going to hang them up? I said, you bet. And so we spent a couple days down there chopping, and then we printed our flyers. And I can't remember. We had a small mailing list we'd gotten from somebody, some motorcycle distributor or something that had a mailing list of people. So we used that mailing list. It was a couple hundred people, but we used that. We got the flyers. We drew up our first few flyers. I still have a lot of those early things, and we drew up the flyer and we printed them, and then a bunch of motorcycle shops. We mailed 5 or 6 flyers to every shop we could find, in the San Fernando Valley, the LA area. And our first race was what I have there, and the results, about 45, 50 guys showed up. And the next race, we had 100 riders show up. And by the 3rd or 4th race, we were getting a couple hundred guys. Of course, we tapped into San Diego immediately because Carlsbad was right down there, like where Ricky Johnson and all those guys were living, was about 40 miles for them, where it was about 60 miles for us to come down the coast. Yeah. So Lachine, Johnson,
Burnworth, Dogger,
what you call it, Marty Smith. Marty Smith's dad was my paramedic. He was my EMT for the first 3 or 4. He taught EMT stuff for the San Diego Fire Department. Fireman. He was the instructor.
Okay.
So it was perfect. And all those guys were looking for a cheap way. Buzz Croft, Tommy Croft's dad, he ended up working for me for 17 years. After Tommy got his factory ride with Honda, and he was riding a Hodaka at that time. And Buzz kept coming because he said, when my wife gives me a honeydew list, I tell her, oh, I'm sorry, I got to go to the races this weekend.
He'd rather be at the track.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was not at all interested in doing her honeydew list. So he worked for me. In fact, he helped me a lot on the house when we were building it up in Running Springs. But anyway.
So the track you laid out, was it the track that became Carlsbad Raceway?
Yep.
The freeway and all of it?
All of it. And
that was the first course you laid out, and it stayed the same because it never really changed.
No, it never changed because we put all the water lines in.
Yeah.
With hoses, 'cause we did hoses, and that was my first experience in trying to put up sprinklers. I had much better success with the water systems we did at the factory tracks.
Yeah.
40 years later, 30 years later, but it was we put the pipes in, and then we needed fencing, and Carl and Larry was adamant about that. You're going to fence it because he was worried about getting sued, and so we ended up calling up a company in Northern California, and they had snow fencing. In the winter time, they put up snow fencing on portions of I-5 and stuff to keep the drifts off the highway.
Yep.
They sold fencing, and I said, "You got any used?" He said, "Oh yeah, we got a lot of used snow fencing." There was no market for it used. I mean, when they sold it to the state, it was always new. I said, "I need used, but good, not broken, lats or anything, a snow fence." And he said, "How much you want?" I said, "Truck and trailer full." And he said, "Okay." So that was a good thing for him. I don't remember what we paid, $800 or something at the time for a semi truck and trailer load of snow fencing. These rolls, the rolls were about, I don't know, about this tall, as far as from the 2.5 feet, 3 feet in diameter.
Okay.
And 4 foot high snow fence. And that's what we ended up. And then we needed stakes. And then I got a rude awakening that those T-stakes were $6 a piece. And I went, wow, that's not going to work. And again, another friend of mine says, hey, over in area by the 57 freeway, I'm trying to think of that area there.
Pomona area?
Yeah, kind of Pomona. I guess I'll say Pomona for the time being. I'll think of it in a minute. And oil wells, a lot of oil wells over there. And he said they got drill rod. And when the drill rod wears out, they sell it for scrap. So I roared over there in my truck one day, went to a place down in Costa Mesa that rented stuff like welding gear and stuff, cutting torch. Took a cutting torch, and I went down there, and I ended up buying, hundreds of feet of used drill rod. Came in 21-foot lengths.
Okay.
And I cut it up.
Like 6 foot
yeah.
pieces or whatever?
Yeah. I think it worked out 5.5 feet per, and I could put 8 inches in the ground. And I didn't want the stakes to be above the fence line because it was like a dagger, as far as somebody hitting them. And we ended up...
That's what you used?
I used that drill rod, and we put we once got the fencing up, the course never moved.
Yeah.
So
and that fencing, I mean, it's crazy because the track would actually go up on it. I remember there were spots
you'd
be up riding on the fence.
Oh, yeah. By the scoring tower there, Billy Grossi, his first trip down here, or it was Bobby, I don't know if it was his older brother or him, we were riding Huskies at the time, going to that school that Tiblin ran down there. He ran that Husky school down there for a couple of years. He actually he was the one that did the barrel thing on the finish line that everybody did at the end. He was almost, his shoulder was almost perpendicular to the ground. Yeah. He rode on that fence when he just, because the dirt had kind of burned up around it, and he just rocketed through that scoring area. And he was the first one to do it. And anyway, so we got that. That was the drill rod we used. And then we put in water. We had to get the water we had to bring it across the drag strip. And we didn't know what we were doing. So we got some 2-inch pipe. We thought, wow, a lot of water comes out of a 2-inch pipe. And a bunch of PVC. And we put it together to make, and we hooked it up to the water system, the main water system that came down to Carlsbad. It was in that center section where they had that big sweeper that they used for Superbiker and stuff. They came down low and then came around and swept up onto the drag strip. And that little area there was where the water place was, and we brought it from there. And then we started putting pipe in the ground, 2-inch, up and down the hills, so we could water. We'd water all night. That was all we could do was water, just keep moving the hoses. We'd be dead tired on Sunday morning, but watered Saturday night. And that was what a lot of guys really liked because the track was really wet in the daytime. We did a good job. where a lot of these tracks, like Indian Dunes, especially Saddleback, the dust would get so bad, until they got the water truck system really working well. In the early days of Saddleback, it was a joke.
Yeah. A lot of those photos, it's just a dust bowl. You can see.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was another thing that the guys really liked. And then we went to the manufacturers and said, hey, besides the string pennants, how about banners? And they go, how many do you need? In those days, they'd give us boxes of them. And it got to the end there, they got so expensive, that, a box of banners, I don't know, that's $400, And that was, I remember Kenny Clark telling me, I just got the bill, it's $400. I gave you $800 worth of banners last month. Well, I didn't know what they cost. He didn't either until he got the invoice. And so anyway, we ended up to bannering the place up, made it look like a real motocross track, as far as what people imagined. And then we had all these dads. Brock Glover's father came down, worked. Ronnie Lachine dad, he had the oil company at the time, but it was really small. I can't remember. Maxima, yeah. And everybody was looking for a free ride for their kid. Hey, if I work for you on Saturday, we get free gate fee and free entry. Yeah, sure, okay. So they'd show up and give me a full day's work, and it was kind of unique at the time. Not too many people were doing it, but we leaned on the San Diego people because they were close. So we had a lot of. And the mini view guy showed up, Vic Curley. Remember those little plastic mini views?
I've got some. Yeah.
And I think Mark still got some of those things. And he was doing golf courses at the time, but he'd only get 12 or 13 foursomes. But he'd sell hundreds of those things. And he was right there. Well, he was another guy. He and his wife, Betty, Vic and Betty Curley, they were great people. They started out with us, and he started selling those mini views down there. Of course, they caught on like wildfire.
Oh, yeah.
And he got really good at taking great pictures, and he'd line himself up at the jump coming off the top of that thing by the starting line, or by the finish line there. Guys would be airborne, and everybody wanted an airborne picture, like they'd seen in the magazines from Europe, the guys doing the whips and everything, In fact, that one picture of DeCoster whipping it sideways off a jump became a thing that Cycle News used for years, one of their little platform things that they had in the picture. And then I got to go and learned a lot of guys. I gave 99% of the newspaper guys that are now working for magazines and whatever they're working for, their start. They're all high school kids. And they wanted to work. And then when Ascot opened, I had a deluge of people that wanted to work for me down there. And we set the course up every night.
So was motocross just really picking up steam at that time? At
that time, yeah. We
and did you take kind of all the things you had seen and learned in Europe and try to implement them here a little bit?
Absolutely. That was our whole idea, the lane of the courses. And even when we went to Ascot Park, we'd seen some stadium races. They called stadium races in England and in France, where they jumped off of crash walls and stuff like that, because they had the car racing over there, same, jalopies and shit. And so, yeah, we jumped them on and off the wall there at Ascot and built some ramps and stuff because we found that the mini bike riders weren't too interested in jumping, so we ran a ramp for them. And a lot of the beginner riders thought that was kind of cool, too. They didn't have to jump off the wall. Even though it was only 4 foot high, it was still a real feat for them.
Yeah.
Because these kids were starting from scratch. I mean, Dave Pesce, I can think of a half a dozen guys that rode their bikes. They were street bikes. Like he was riding Montestas. He rode it to Ascot and spent an hour taking the lights off. Racing it. Then another hour or 20 minutes putting the lights back on and ride it home.
Oh, that's funny.
I mean, that was a deal. I mean, the guys, and then it got better, when time, and Bruce McDougall, we laugh about it all the time. In fact, when I was working for him, lunchtime and break times, all we did was talk about the old days of motocross. Bruce was riding, and I was putting on the races, and he said that, he lived at home. His mom did his laundry. He lived in his bedroom, and all he had was a van payment, and van and gas, because he had a free bike and free parts. Yeah. And they were living the high love. They were making $1,000 a week.
Yeah.
And back in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, $1,000 a week was a shitload of money.
Yeah.
And they were making more money than their parents were.
Yeah.
You know?
That's crazy.
Just riding 3 or 4 nights a week.
And Bruce McDougall would have been one of the local hot shoes at the time. I mean, he's probably not that well known in the national or global motocross community, but in Southern California in that time period, he was the man.
Oh, yeah, he was good. He had factory Yamaha rides, and he and Tim Hart, and a couple of them were all Yamaha guys, and then he rode Honda for a long time. In fact, he's going to be in the I just heard the other day, he's going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame at the Trailblazers this coming.
Is that right?
Year, yeah.
Okay.
Bruce is one of them. Bruce McDougall. And anyway, so he's a good guy. He really is a good guy.
So had you formed CMC then before you created Carlsbad and all that? Was it already formed or
no?
Okay.
When we got Carlsbad going, we decided we're going to make a club. So we got about 12 guys, Walt Axhelm, and several other guys besides Walt, about 10 of us. And we all had work parties, and we went down there and cleaned the brush and put the banners up and stuff. And then it got to the point where Calvin and I were the only 2 guys showing up on a Saturday. We were doing everything. The rest of them would show up on Sunday and ride and pat us on the back and say, hey, you did a good job.
Yeah.
So we walked into the club meeting one night. We were having them at a park in Burbank. There was a rec building there that they allowed us to have, anybody could rent it. So we were using that. We walked in one night and said, we quit. Everybody looked at us and said, we're going to run the races and we're not going to need you. We're not going to ask you for any work or anything. And everybody went, oh, great. We don't have to do it anymore. Give you an excuse. We had to walk our turtle or, whatever. I couldn't make it to the work party, but I could make it to the races.
Yeah, of course.
And so Kelvin and I started out, and Larry was all for it. He said, man, you 2 guys are the only guys that I ever see down here working. So he said, he was kind of one of the guys that said, hey, let's quit those guys and I'll work with you. In fact, if it wasn't for Larry Grismer, CMC probably wouldn't have happened. He fronted us for the insurance and the ambulance for the first 2 years we were down there.
Oh, was that right?
Because he had the drag races going, so he had
contacts and
K&K was handling all his insurance, and he had the local ambulance service all lined up to be there on Saturday nights and Sundays and daytime, whatever. He ran a lot of different types of racing. But Larry said, look, I need you. You guys are really go into it. I can see the amount of time and effort you've put into it. And he said, I think it's going to be a success too. But I'll cover the ambulance and I'll cover the insurance. So he bought the insurance from K&K.
Okay.
And then I got to the point where I knew you needed insurance. I mean, I needed it. And that's how CMC grew so big, so fast. I was all of a sudden getting calls from Northern California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho. Hey, we need motocross insurance. Where can we get it? And I had a policy with K&K, and I'd flown back to K&K. I actually flew back there and sat there in their office, told them what I was doing, what I was planning. And at the very beginning, and I said, hey, I want you guys to only insure CMC races. Tell them, hey, if I call you and wants motocross insurance, you give them our phone number, and I'll run your insurance program on every race I run. I needed, like Agajanian. Like Larry, it was $2 million. And of course, back in those days, $2 million was a lot of money. I paid a lot more money for insurance in the early days than I did later times.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Because they spread it out. There was more motorcycle stuff going on over the years. And my insurance costs went down. But then that's where I started. I had my first calls was Central Valley, Fresno, Madeira, places like that. That's where I met Pat Pipes and his son Aaron. They ran Aaron ran he sponsors Rock.
Yeah, the Pipes Motorsports.
Yeah. And they were just running a local race called Little Okie on Saturday nights down there. The place was just 10 acres or 12 acres or something. It was really a small little place. But anyway, they got it. And
so you were getting all of these different promoters insurance through CMC.
That's how I got them to. They wanted. I said, if you got to run our insurance, and to get a sanction because I didn't want to put out any sanctions that have no insurance because this is the day when too many people got sued.
Yeah.
I spent months. I mean, God, the amount of times I spent in courthouses in L.A. and I mean, shit, I had a big lawsuit going on there. I was driving up to Fresno, spending the whole week in court in Fresno, and drive back Friday afternoon to run the races at Ascot and Sunday, and then fly back up Monday morning.
Well, that's another question I had was any promoter, and I've put on a couple of events. We did the Elsinore Grand Prix last year.
Yeah.
And I spoke with Goat prior to doing it, and he just said, man, careful. Like, it's so gnarly. You'll get sued over anything.
I know.
Somebody, he
trips
said,
over a rock.
Yeah. He said a gal was walking her dog, and it bit somebody walking by, and he got sued.
Yeah.
He's like, man, I wasn't even, I have nothing to do with this. But
well, I'll tell you a funny story. There was a gal that worked for Rolf Tiblin. She was his right-hand girl. I guess he was screwing her on the side, too, being a good motocross guy.
That's what we do.
So, yeah. Anyway, he ended up, she worked for 4 or 5 years, the whole time that they had that Husky Academy down there at Carlsbad. And she was visiting with her friends. She was walking backwards down a grandstand. We had a couple of grandstands near the finish line area there on the side of the track, talking to her friends, and stepped off the back one and broke her ankle or wrist or something, put her wrist down, and he sued us. Thank God somebody was shooting movies of his kid and caught her in the side deal where she was walking backwards down the grandstands. We showed that picture to the court, and they dropped it, kicked it out.
But you must have dealt with dozens and dozens of those lawsuits, yeah?
30 or 40 of them.
Yeah.
Over the years. I got so good at it that up until 2 years ago, I did. Kerry Agajanian was the first one that approached me and said, Stu, I need an expert witness that can't be disqualified. First off, you got to be known by the insurance companies. The insurance companies have to know who you are, and you have to have the experience to where they can't make you can't kick you off as an expert witness. So I filled all those spots. And so I went to work for Kerry, still running CMC races. We were doing I did lawsuits at Orange County International Raceway, all over the place, anything to do with a motorcycle and dirt. And he hired me, and I did a bunch of them. Then he put my name out, and hell, I went up until, 2 years ago. I was going back to Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, godforsaken places that had, there must have been a real shortage of expert witnesses back there that could qualify. Because all the insurance companies knew who I was. I mean, my name was in the records anyway,
Sure.
Millions of dollars worth of insurance. Because at one time, we would have 18 races running between Southern California, Oregon, Washington, and Nevada. And one weekend, it would be 18 CMC races.
Jeez.
At the height of everything, we had 12,000 licensed riders actually on the books. And
That's crazy.
That's
what would the peak have been? Mid-'80s?
Yeah, mid-'80s.
Yeah.
We had our own newspaper, CMC Sports. I did that for over a year. Every 2 months, we did it bi-monthly. Did 5 or 6 issues a year. And we'd mail it out to the guy. We mailed it to him.
Well, so what was the trick to, it's frustrating to me, and there's the occasional circumstance where a track is grossly negligent,
Yeah,
right? They
right.
drive a truck onto the track.
Yeah, I had a couple of those lawsuits. Ambulance went on the track, and the guy ended up in the back of the ambulance with his motorcycle.
So sometimes,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, all right, well, I can kind of see. But most of the time, they're frivolous, right? A guy crashes, he gets hurt.
Yeah.
Man, this track, I crashed on it. And
Yeah.
and it's like, bro, you know what you're doing. You came out here to ride your dirt bike.
Yeah.
You know it's dangerous.
There's the nut behind the handlebars.
Yeah, so that's right, there is. What was the kind of the key to beating these and staying in business? It's such a deterrent for anyone to promote anything anymore.
Well, yeah, no, it was a situation where we had everything really well documented, and we put up, like, I had a major lawsuit. I mean, American Honda, everybody. It was a Golden State at Adelanto. And a kid launched himself over and broke his neck. Paralyzed. And man, his parents came after me like a truck. And they had Americans. The first hearing we had 40 attorneys in the room because they sued everybody that they found a banner. You know, everything that had a banner, whether it was Jim Hale at whatever, and or American Suzuki, American Honda, you know, whatever. They sued them all. Their attorney was just like an ambulance station attorney. Jeez. So there was 50 or 40 attorneys in the first hearing we had up in Victorville at the courthouse. Well, in the end, we sent them all home that day because they were out of the lawsuit. They had a bunch of questions for me. Hey, how many did these people have anything to do with laying the track out? Did they have anything to do with prepping the track? They asked all those kind of questions. I said, no. So it was down to the guy the owner of the track up there, Sunrise, and us. So there was only 2 attorneys left in the room when everybody else was sent home. But we were able to show that we had, like, that event that the kid rode. There was 28 kids in the beginner class. He was a beginner, and his dad thought he was going to be a superstar. You know, I've read articles about Bob Hanna and all the money he's making, and you know, my kid's going to be a Bob Hanna. And that's what they thought. So I ended up showing them that the numbers were there, that all these people rode, nobody got hurt except his kid. And he was out of control. And somebody had some movies of him. They were taping their kid when he launched himself over this double jump. Guys like Jeff Ward that weekend were bunny hopping it. They weren't launching themselves off of it. Keep the wheel close to the ground and keep moving. But anyway, so that's how we beat it.
So a lot of the video helped, huh?
Well, the video helped, but even just I'd get 6 people to give a sworn testimony that, hey, my kid rode it. It was fine. You know, he had no problem and no. And we showed the ambulance runs. I mean, you know, like, hey, there'd be 2 ambulance runs in that whole day at Sand Hill Ranch. And neither one of them were life-threatening or anything. You know, those people never sued me.
Yeah.
But somebody else did.
Yeah, and it seems like when you come through the gate and you sign the waiver...
The waiver's not worth it.
That should be it, but it isn't. You know?
Not in California.
Yeah, and particularly California. And I wanted to ask that, too. Like, I don't feel like California got really litigious and really bad until maybe the last 30 years. Yeah. So maybe into the 70s and 80s, it wasn't as bad. Would you think that's true or no?
No. The 70s and 80s were the worst lawsuits we ever had. And they kept saying, I had people stand up in court and say, under oath, I never knew this motocross racing was dangerous. If I'd known it was dangerous, I never would have let my son ride. I said, yeah, okay. But then it got to the point where it was on TV and the wide world of sport and all that. The race they ran and televised every year down there where the guys rode half of it on blacktop and half of it on Superbikers, yeah. And all the motocross kids were the ones that smoked everybody, you know, Magoo and guys like that. They ran laps around those flat track
Steve
guys.
Wise, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was one of the reasons that it became so prevalent that it was a dangerous sport. I mean, everybody knew it. I mean, anybody that climbed on the bike, that the attorneys wouldn't take them. They just wouldn't take the deal, even though the guy came to them and said, hey, I want this, I want that. So, you know, our friend, better not say that, son. Never mind. I'm not going to talk about it.
Okay. We don't want to get anybody mad. Yeah. So I guess when it comes to those lawsuits and stuff like that, I mean...
It was just time consuming.
Yeah, I would say
I spent 6 weeks in a courthouse in downtown L.A., and I couldn't drive myself there because at that time I had a 1974 Mercedes 240D. I the diesel car worked for me so good in Europe that I bought a brand new Mercedes from Mission Viejo Mercedes diesel and drove the shit out of it. They wouldn't let me drive the car because it's a late model car and it's Mercedes. They're going to think you're rich. So the attorney would pick me up at my house in Cordero Lane every morning. We'd drive to the courthouse, downtown L.A. We were there for about 6 weeks.
Jeez.
They ended up suing the shit out of the ambulance. They really screwed up. They had a new crew on it, didn't know what they were doing. They didn't give the guy enough oxygen, and the guy had a little bit of brain damage. I mean, he could still read, write, and speak, but I mean, he was, you could tell he was impaired. So, and they ended up going after the ambulance, and that was it. And he got sued. I don't know what ever happened to him.
It's just a shame because, like I said, you know what you're signing up for. You sign a waiver, unless it's something really grossly negligent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like tractor or truck or something drives on the course during an event, and the guys hit it. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a shame that is a thing still.
Well, yeah, it was that, and I'm sure there's a lot of other sports that had the same problem. I mean, maybe the first time the guys were playing hockey or something on ice, maybe they thought that was dangerous, I mean, my kid broke his ankle playing hockey, and heck, I'm going to sue the shit out of these guys.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, well, anyway. So CMC started to kind of grow really as from the insurance side.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
And then you say maybe mid-'80s was the peak.
Yep.
When did you start the Golden State Nationals? And was that your biggest series?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We ran our 2016 or whatever it was our last one.
Really? It went that long?
Yeah. Oh. 36th annual.
Wow.
36 of them we ran.
So do the math on that. If from 16, 36, so 80?
Yeah, probably in the late 70s, early 80s was the first ones we ran.
And you got to have some good stories from those. I mean, literally, these were nationals.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody had a call. I mean, I can tell you that one about Brad Lackey. He went up there, came up to Sand Hill Ranch. We had 3 divisions of 500s, and we whittled them down to make a moto.
Yeah.
And he came up to me halfway through the day and said, "Stu, I didn't qualify." And I said, "Brad, nobody's going to, your name's on the back of your jersey, but nobody cares,
Yeah.
And it was like a national. I mean, better than a national because we allowed the guys to ride any class they wanted that day. So Ricky Johnson would ride the 125, the 250, and the 500.
Right.
And a lot of guys did that, especially the factory guys. And all the factories supported the hell out of it. I mean, DeCoster and the Suzuki and Yamaha and all those guys said it was great. The newspaper ads, they took Cycle News ads, like Bob Hanna storms the Golden State, this last Sunday, Yamaha, and whether it was up at Madeira Lakes or wherever it was,
Yeah.
And we picked good tracks, or we tried to pick good tracks. I mean, sometimes the weather didn't work with us very good, but we always had good tracks, good pit area, and we ran it really well. I mean, we'd get the guy, like I said, at times I ran 3 tracks. I ran one of the last Golden States I ran at Saddleback. We had the back track, the mini bike track, and the main track. We ran all 3 tracks. I had 3 crews of people running all 3 of them simultaneously. Announcers, everything.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Did
you ever have, like I know another thing that's difficult, whether you're a team manager at a test track or you're a promoter of an event and somebody gets hurt, that's heavy. It's disturbing. Like I think David Bailey got hurt at Golden State.
He was right? critically hurt. I was right there. I saw it all happen. I just happened to be standing there. Wardy and him were having it out, and they were both riding the 250, and they came around this one corner. It was at Lake Madeira, and they had
it was Huron.
Huron, I'm sorry, Huron, and it was a series of rollers, And he thought that he cleared the last roller, so he sat back down. The bike came up, seat came up, fractured his spine. He never fell off. He fell off after the fact. I mean, in other words, 20 feet down the track, he tipped over. And now I got there before DeCoster got there, and DeCoster was right in the area, and he grabbed David Bailey, and he started squeezing his legs and stuff. David said, I don't feel it. But he had the best treatment you ever could have had. Those Madeira Fire Department guys were our EMTs for that day. Or at the Huron. They were parked on the hill with their fire truck. And they had a helicopter base a quarter of a mile from there that they used during the crop season for they had an accident would happen, with a combine or something. Mm-hmm. They could fly a guy out. Mm. He was at the hospital within an hour and a half of the accident in San Francisco.
When something like that happens,
it's a bummer. Yeah. Remember you went and visited him. Mark stayed there. He didn't even drive back with me. He stayed up there and visited David in his hospital bed for 2 or 3 days.
Does that kind of stuff affect you, though? I mean, because you're going to promote enough races, guys are going to get hurt. You're going to have people get killed.
Yeah, it's just 5 deaths.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
5 that I know of. I mean, maybe somebody died 2 months later from accident they had, but that were killed at the race. I had the one kid at Irwindale went down and a footrest caught him right in the back of the head. That was when we used to run the pros over the jump there at Irwindale Raceway, and it was a good track. I mean, we ran a lot of races there, ran 4 or 5 years, and every Friday night, not every, but a good season, 30 Friday nights a year, and you kind of think about it. I mean,
the fact that you know the number, it tells me it's like.
Yeah, I do know. Yeah. And had the one kid at Carlsbad died at the bottom of the hill. Most of them were on their own when they crashed, and a few of them were hit, and that caused the accident, caused this injury that killed them. But then I had a couple 125 kids that died early at Carlsbad. Just that one straightaway going up to the horseshoe, where everybody went up to the horseshoe and came back through the center there, by the where the scoring building was right here, and then the starting line was there, and they go up that one deal. They were both going up that straightaway. It's simple straightaway. I mean, no big fancy rollers or anything in it. They fell off and got hit, died. Never got a lawsuit out of any of those deaths. I had the guy, this kid. Rusty Meeker. Funny. The name just popped in. Rusty Meeker was a kid. He was about 14 years old. His dad was the superintendent of schools in this Pomona area. He was in charge of about 5 high schools and 3 or 4 junior highs and whatever other schools were there. And his mom was working for a big school district. And they were just every weekend. I mean, they'd been following us for 3 years. Kid was riding a Monarch. That's how long ago it was. He went down. In fact, Marty Smith's dad kept him alive for the whole time. He'd have died at the track, but he knew what to do because he had all the, the stuff, and had them all propped up, and just everything he did right. And so when and he told the ambulance guys when they showed up, look, this is the way you're going to do it. This is the traction you have to have on this kid. And they had his head, bolted down to the backboard and everything. And he died, and they ended up pulling the plug on him. I mean, the 4th or 5th day, the doctor said, hey, he's got no motor skills. But anyway, Rusty Meeker, God, it's funny how you think of a name like that. It just flashes in your mind. And that happened when he was riding a Monarch, and it was a brand new motorcycle then.
So Monarch, geez, that's 70s? I mean, that's a long time ago.
70s.
Yeah, it's just one of those very difficult things that race promoters, you're going to have to, you promote enough races, it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me, I heard at one point you sued the AMA.
Yes.
Because they were trying to keep people from coming to your events. Tell me that story.
Okay. The AMA had a rule in their rule book. It was actually printed in our rule book that you couldn't run a race within 750 miles. 750-mile radius. They could run a race in, Michigan, and I couldn't run one here in California. Not quite that far away, but
Arizona. Or,
yeah, it
or
could
Vegas,
run one. Yeah, Arizona, Vegas, whatever. I couldn't run anything in California. So I had a guy named Gary Lovell. He was an attorney at Newport Beach attorney, really super guy. He told me, he says, his son rode a few of my races, but he wasn't very good, so they kind of stopped riding him. But he really followed a lot of our events, and they sued me because I ran this race. And Richard Irestead, Tim Lundy, I'm trying to think of some of the other names, Tim Hart. There was about 8 guys that they sued too. They told them that if you're caught riding a CMC event, we're going to restrict your license. We won't allow you to ride any AMA events. Well, that scared the shit out of these guys. They're all young guys, and they were trying to think about doing. So they sued us. Gary says, "Okay, we're going to fight it, Stu." And so here's the deal. But what happened was a total freak accident. We were in the courthouse, Orange County Courthouse, Santa Ana, for that area. And because the race that they sued me, I was running at Carlsbad or Saddleback in Southern California area. I don't remember which track they sued me with. They had 6 attorneys, literally 6 of them, sitting at their little desk. And they were out for blood. They were going to show me. And I called NMA and all these alphabet soup guys all the way back to the Midwest. Hey, you want to help me with the lawsuit? Hell no, Stu. It's your deal. You're getting sued, not me. So nobody came to the thing. Anyway, we got there the day of the court, and we had a little strategy going. And I showed up, and everybody showed up, and the judge said, "Okay, we're going to make." He introduced everybody. This is the AMA, American Motorcycle Association. This is Stu Peters, the CMC, and he says, "Is there anybody else in this courthouse or courtroom that's got anything to say taking to this case?" 2 people stood up. I remember him vividly. Kind of a short, pudgy guy and a tall, skinny chick. And the girl did all the talking. She stood up and said, "Your Honor, we're from the state of California. And if these AMA people that are from the state of Ohio are trying to block us," because I called them up. I called them up, but I didn't think they were going to do anything about it. "If you don't stop harassing Mr. Peters," and they named all the riders, Irestead, Lundy, Hart, whatever, "will revoke for you the right to do business in the state of California." That was it. They all stood up, closed up their briefcases, and.
So who was this tall gal?
She was parked for the state of California.
Oh, okay.
They both were working for the state of California. We represent the state. They said we represent the state of California, and Mr. Peters.
Did you know they were going to be there?
No.
They just showed up.
They obviously had planned to show up, do something. It was some kind of a plan. That they said, "We're representing the state of California. Mr. Peters is a corporation in the state of California. You are not a corporation in the state of California, the AMA. You come from Ohio. And if you proceed on with this problem and you keep harassing Mr. Peters," and she named all the riders, "we'll revoke the right for you to do business in the state of California." That was it. Boom. AMA sent me an apology letter, and I became good friends with Youngblood. Well, he came on a little later. He wasn't running the show at that time. Somebody else was. But he called me up 3 or 4 times and said, what can we work out? Another thing that happened, Dave Coombs, Sr., Davey Coombs, who's running all the AMA stuff now, his dad called me one day at my office when we were down here in Sky Park Circle years and years ago. We were running, I think it was Wednesday nights or maybe Thursday night. It wasn't a Friday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Ascot Park, that long ago. He says, Stu, I'm Dave Coombs. I got a lot of races here on the East Coast. Would you ever consider cutting the United States in half? I run the East Coast, you run the West Coast. I said, yeah, I'd sure consider that, absolutely. We had about 5 meetings at Ascot Park on a Wednesday night, sitting on the grandstands with our clipboards and our paper, writing down shit. And we were going to do it, and he died.
Oh, that was just prior to his passing.
Yeah.
So he was going to be like CMC East?
Yeah, CMC East. He liked the idea of CMC. He says, and well, he says, AMA screwed, Well, I did Red Bud for the first 2 or 3 years. They were open. Gene Ritchie, he was the owner. He called me up one day and said, Stu, I can't get insurance. The AMA won't insure me. They won't sanction me. And I got all this money I put into this track, and it's all ready to go. Hey, would you insure me? And I said, you bet. No problem. So I insured them for the first maybe 3 years they were alive. And then he called me up one time and says, hey, they offered me 2 nationals and a bunch of other top priority and some Loretta Lynn qualifiers and blah, blah, blah. And I said, to say no more. Do your thing. Join them and, good luck. And but I licensed the riders. We had 300-400 riders out of that area. Michigan.
Yeah, it's crazy. Did you ever, I don't know if the timelines lined up. Did McQueen ever show up to one of your races as Harvey Mushman? Or
No.
You were,
no, it was
he was already past that.
He was already.
Oh, okay.
He was, because we were, years before that in the 60s, when I really met him and kind of knew him. And then in the late 60s, with 68, we started. I think he might have been riding some enduros or some desert stuff or just screwing around, but he never showed any races, showed up any races.
Okay. I want to just get your thoughts on, a couple things. You did some Trans AMA races as well.
Yes. The AMA hired me to do the first 2 years. We did a Northern California track and 2 in Southern California. They said, what's this word motocross? And, they're all flat track guys that were running on the board at those days.
Okay.
And they didn't know how to run motors, how to store them or anything. They weren't interested. If we paid you how much? And I said, I want $500 for me and $500 for Kelvin, and we'll cover all the expenses. Hire the score girls. And
out of that?
Out of that, we weren't trying to get rich. We were just, I was in love with motorcycles, and I thought, hey, we'll go ahead and make this happen. So we ran the first 2 years that the Trans Ams were out here.
Okay. And what was Saddleback?
We ran Saddleback, Carlsbad, and it wasn't Sand Hill Ranch. It was another track in Northern California.
Okay.
It's closed up.
Okay.
Now it's been closed up for a long time. But Brad Lackey won it. He paid some guy to go up there and ride and sign up in his name. That came down here. Bob Hershey. Remember that name, Bob Hershey?
I remember seeing it, yeah.
Okay. He was riding CZ at the same time Brad was riding a CZ. And so he hired him to sign up for him and go up north. And because he couldn't make it. He had something else he had to do, or mother wasn't going to let him ride or something else.
Okay.
The early days, And
you wanted to get points?
Yeah, he wanted to get points. So he won the series by having this other guy show up.
Did you know at the time?
Oh, yeah, I knew. I didn't give a shit. That was his problem, his problem.
That's funny. What about the USGPs?
I helped Gavin a lot. About the last five GPs down at Carlsbad, and I don't remember the years now. He had my support. He used my support unit, and a lot of my PA and a lot of stuff like that I was already there. You know what I mean? I had in place. I just elaborated on it. You know, we put extra speakers up and stuff like that. And then we had that tower. That was a little rodeo tower.
Oh, it was?
That Larry Grisberg got given to him. And he loaded it on a pickup truck and a trailer and a pickup truck. He put two together, put that old rodeo tower. I remember when we dragged it down there because we just had a little thing that was about the size of a 8x10 building, you know, small, just 3 girls and Calvin was in there at the beginning. And then we put that rodeo tower up and it worked out really well, you know. Yeah. Wide World of Sport used it for all their guys. In fact, Sandra worked for Wide World of Sport. The last couple of years they ran it. She was their lookout person. I mean, she could spot her. They call her a spotter. She could tell that was Brock Glover, that was Ricky Johnson, whoever, you know. Yeah. And just by looking out there, not having to figure out who it was. Yeah. Anyway, so that, but we had that rodeo building there, and we ended up, that worked out really well.
It's got to be a good feeling, though, for you. This is a track you literally cut in by hand.
Yeah.
With a weed eater and whatever.
Yeah, no weed eaters. Sickle.
Really? Like old school?
Oh, old school. We didn't have $2 to rub together in those days. I was working at Fan Steel, and Kelvin was working for Kobe Cycle Sales in Reseda as a mechanic, you know. And so we just...
well, to see it go from that, you guys literally walking it and laying out to now you're holding a USGP there, all the best riders in the world, that's got to be pretty...
Oh, it was cool. Yeah, it was cool. And, you know, it was something that we did. The track was well liked, and they didn't make us do any major changes to the first Grand Prix. And Larry was all worried about that. Maybe it's going too fast going down the hill or something. I said, hey, it's motocross, Larry. Come on. Got to, you know, look at it. The only thing we did later on, we ran that extra loop on the hill. If you remember, it only went to the top of the hill and it came straight down. We ended up coming down and going around those bunch of bushes that were on the side of the hill and then bringing it down just to slow them down. Because there was one race I had, Brad Lackey and Rex Staten. They were looking at each other. Who was going to shut off first? And they both went through the fence at the bottom of the hill. You know,
that freeway was fast.
Oh, I know.
Scary fast.
And it was bumpy.
Yeah.
And it was like pavement.
Yeah.
It was all adobe, you know. Shit. On rainy days, there was times that I couldn't, or good rain, I couldn't run the hill. No. We just ran the sand wash and, you know, the bottom part of the track.
Yeah.
It was just slicker and snot.
Yeah. Well, that is really cool. You were inducted into the Hot Shoe Hall of Fame in 21, AMA Hall of Fame in 2011. I mean, those are pretty big honors.
And, the Trailblazers Hall of Fame in 2008.
Okay. Do those awards mean a lot to you? I mean, or is it?
They're neat that I got recognized before I died. I mean, a lot of times the guy said, "Oh, this guy ran races for 30 years, and now we're going to honor him." You know, he did a good job.
Been dead for 5 years.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, man, it's really impressive what you've done. Man, you lived it. You know, you went to Europe before anybody.
Yeah.
Tried to live the dream over there, and just everything you've done has been incredible. And I remember coming over, would have been mid to late 80s when Golden States were going crazy.
Yeah.
And that's how I remember you from that window of time, in my amateur career. And you were always great as a promoter.
I mean, I've had guys like Brock Glover, Brad Lackey, Ricky Johnson come up to me at different events, nothing to do with the race, just on the side. Say, Stu, if it wasn't for you, I don't know where I'd be.
Yeah, that's
pretty because
cool.
of the fact that, and I thought that was cool. Donnie Hansen's got that a dozen times to me, you know, and what you call it, Gary Denton, another guy. I ran those Hawaiian Supercrosses, 5 years of them.
Oh, you did? In Aloha Stadium?
Yeah.
That was you?
Yeah. Mark rode the last one or the last two? The last two.
Were those profitable, or was that?
Oh, yeah, shit. We talked, it was a state run. That Aloha Stadium is owned by the state of Hawaii.
Okay.
The state owns that property. And that's how we got knocked out of it. In the 5 we were running successfully. We had 32,000 people the last year.
Jeez.
Paid. We got them to cut the stadium in half. it was like Anaheim, old Anaheim.
Uh-huh.
It had the big tunnel in the back, and so we could run the bikes down the tunnel to get them onto the track and run the tunnel. Ron Crandall, remember that name?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Old AMA referee.
Yeah. He was my track builder. He went there every year. He built the track. He'd bring one of his buddies with him. The two of them would knock the track out. We'd have 100 truckloads. I counted them. In fact, John DeSoto said, I lost track of all the trucks that came in and out of that thing, Stu. And, we ran those. I had Ron Crandall building tracks for me when we went to Connecticut and Rhode Island. I ran those arena crosses in the early days. Guys like Staten and Russ Darnell, all those old guys that were riding at the time. I took 3 or 4 riders and then figured on everybody else was be local that showed up. And
Evel Knievel?
Oh yeah, I did 2 events for Evel Knievel.
The Snake River Canyon motocross. You put that on as well.
Yeah, I busted. I was starting them flag start, and they kept saying, "Stu, we were starting 40 guys at a time because we had 600 guys there."
Yeah.
I mean, Jimmy Weinert showed up from New York, for that event, $25,000 purse.
Yeah, it was a big purse.
Back in the day. I mean, in fact, the guys were going nuts, and that reminds me of another story I'll tell you. Anyway, they ended up, they kept saying, Stu, you got to back up. And I knew they'd get too much speed going. And Bob Oliver, and to this day I remember his name, he rode for Andy, the guy that ran the CZ shop in Simi Valley. Famous the guy who ran. There was all a bunch of guys that rode out of that area. And he popped a wheelie, and I was up against the snow fence, and I put my hands out with the flag. I had the starting flag, the green flag, and as part of his bike hit the thing, and he hit my leg. That was 180 degrees. Broke all the bones in the lower leg. It was because everybody ran over to me, and I was used to wear my white uniform, my white pants, my little white CMC jacket. And I remember it was Tim Hart and Lackey and a couple other guys. They said, Stu, you okay? And I said, no, look at my foot. And the guy went, oh, shit. I thought one of the guys was going to pass out because it was absolutely backwards. And I had 2 guys at that Snake River Canyon Hospital. Thank God, Dr. Haig, remember the Haig boys? He had this bitchin' motorhome, one of the first ones that General Motors put out with a big 460 V8 in it, and a beautiful custom body. We drove up with him. He wanted, his kids were up there. And so he says, hey, Stu, if I drive you up, can I get a free entries and everything? I said, you bet. So my wife and I, and I don't know if Mark was with me, you might have read your own box fan or whatever. That's when they went up with him, and they drove me back. But they put that cast on it, weighed 80 pounds. I mean, more is good, a little bit more is better, The cast was huge.
Big lead anchor.
And it was all screwed up. Thank God the next day, Doc Haig knew a guy, an orthopedic surgeon at, it's over there by Victorville.
St. Mary's? At a hospital?
Yeah, a hospital over there, a little community.
Oh, there's Victor Valley or St. Mary's.
Anyway, Anyway, he said, I know the surgeon at that hospital, and I've already called him, and he's going to meet you there. We're cutting that cast off and the bone alignment was fucking like this, And the guy put me on a table, 7-foot table. He had a hand crank, and it had like a little leather shoe. Put my foot in that leather shoe, laced it up, buckled it up, and he started cranking. And they put me on the TV screen, had a screen the size of that TV right there, and for the X-ray machine, and they just kept boop, 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 boop. As soon as it got like that, he stopped cranking, put the cast on, set everything. I have like 12 thousandths between my left leg and my right leg.
Jeez.
It would have been 3 inches if I'd left the cast on there.
Did that hurt like crazy, or were you out for this?
No, it didn't hurt at all. I mean, I actually didn't hurt at all because it was just everything was moving. I mean, everything was sore and it hurt. And I remember we put that thing on my hip, up to my hip. That's when we had the Lincoln, that 72 Lincoln, brown Lincoln. Remember, Mom? She used to drive me. Oh, we used to get in such arguments. That was the only car I could fit into. You know, we put the seat all the way back on the passenger side, and they had to put it up to my groin, and they did my toes. Everything was cast all the way down to keep everything straight. And so I'd say, "Oh, you're doing the wrong way." No, yeah, damn it, you drive. I'd say, "I can't." Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I've heard this story from some guys who went to that race and said that they got word like, "Hey, get to the bank right now and cash your checks," because at a point,
Evil bounced every check.
Yeah, I've heard that.
He had, I had guys. One of the kids from Northern California, his dad was a warden of Alcatraz at the time. Alcatraz prison was still open back in the day.
Okay.
He called me up and he says, "Stu, I like you, buddy. I've been to your races, but damn it, my kid's $800 check bounced. And if you don't do something about it, I'm going to have to sue you." I mean, the Joneses, everybody, Gary Jones and all those different guys, Weiner, all of them, all our checks bounced. Well, I called up Evil and I said, "Look, you really screwed things up. I'll make it good. But it'll take me a week or so." It took him a week. He made it all good.
He did make it good.
Oh, yeah, it all went away. Yeah.
That guy was shady.
Oh, talk about it. He called me at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's when we were living in Fountain Valley. We'd be sitting there, phone would ring, and I'd go, "Hello, hey, Stu, this is Evil. I want to know how everything's going, And I'd say, "God damn it, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to sleep, asshole." Marina hated him. Oh, fuck. The guy had a bottle of Purple Sack. It's a liquor,
Okay, yeah.
Purple Sack. He used to sip on that thing at 8 o'clock in the morning. He was a screwed up mess. But he came down to Carlsbad. He wanted $2,000 to jump at one of our cycle circuses. We came up with the name Cycle Circus, and we ran 3 of them at Carlsbad Raceway. We printed programs for them and everything. We used the top of the hill. Wasn't going to be a hill climb. It was going to be who could get on the top of that hill fast. So I put a person up on the top of the hill with a stopwatch.
Okay.
And whoever got up there first won. And we did elimination races that way.
Okay.
You had two guys at a time up there. We did the thing on the blacktop where they had to do a little bit of that. Did the motocross track. Did a trials area, a run, ride, and run type event, which is you run. You're here and your motorcycle's 50, 60 feet away, and you run, and then you jump on your bike, and you have to start it and ride back.
Okay.
Whoever gets across the finish line first wins that race.
Okay.
Did a whole bunch of goofy shit like that, and it was a success. I mean, David Bailey and Jim Wilson and all the guys that were the guys back in those days all showed up. They thought it was neat, Yeah. And we paid some decent money. Gave him a 200% payback or something. Yeah, that was the guy that started a 200% payback.
I remember that.
And then the guys said, "Okay, Stu, we'll run your race because you're putting some of your money in." Because when it was 100%, we're paying for our own deal.
Yeah.
Lars Larson, he was a funny guy. I knew him from Europe. His wife and my wife got along great. We used to camp because when you were riding in Europe, you never stayed in a hotel unless you were in an Iron Curtain country, and then you had to. But everybody camped. Even guys like Tiblin, he was world champion, Jeff Smith. They
just camping out.
Camping out, little tent, Or Smithy was so short he could sleep in the front seat of his truck, and put a sleeping bag in, climb into it, and go to sleep. And everybody sold shit over there. Everybody sold stuff. Like I was telling you, first time I met Joe Robert and DeCoster in that Grand Prix in France. Was they were selling chains. I needed a chain. I didn't know them from Adam. Some guy told me, "Hey, there's a couple of young guys over there from Belgium that they're selling chains, Stu." And I said, "Okay." So I went over there, and they're all boxed, flat box,
Yeah.
And I bought 2 chains from them. And how you doing? I'm, and then of course I knew after a while. I knew who Roger was.
Figured out who they were.
Yeah. Well, after that was when he first signed with CZ. He was 19 years old, and so he was just a kid.
Jeez. That's cool. What a cool experience though to get to see and bump elbows with them at that point in their
Yeah.
careers. Yeah. Well, listen, I it's just been a crazy career, and I'm stoked you came on to kind of talk through your story a little bit, because I don't know if people know.
Yeah.
Obviously the guys in your circle do, but you've had so much influence on the sport. So I appreciate that. Kind of a last question we ask everybody is how you want to be remembered in the sport.
Kenny Clark probably said it best one time. He said, "Stu, you're one of the fairest promoters that I knew, and you gave the riders their money's worth." So,
perfect.
Now he was a team manager at Yamaha, and that was when he'd been team manager for years and all that kind of stuff. And I got good remarks from DeCoster, good remarks from all the guys, even the team managers now. Another thing that Mark wanted me to point out was the fact that Gunnar Lindstrom, who his son is now the team manager for American Honda, he and I raced together. And there was a guy that worked on suspension. Who was that guy? The Swedish guy. Short little guy. Anyway, he said, "Stu," he told me here when we was here.
Stig Peterson? Stig Peterson?
Stiggy Peters.
Yeah.
Stig, yeah. He says, "Stu, I was sweeping the shop at Öhlins Suspension in Sweden when you came there. And you were racing, and I just remember you from that." He told me that on the side, kind of thing. Because I got to know him pretty well because he did a lot of contingency stuff with us and stuff like that. But he was the shop sweeper. He said, "I was about 14 years old and doing my thing, living the dream."
That's great. He did my suspension for a while as an amateur.
He did
Yeah,
Mark's suspension for a long time. Hell.
PPS.
Yeah. In fact, I remember going to Saddleback Park, and he was on the back track doing somebody's suspension, and he called me on the phone. I was one of those guys that had a cell phone. I had a cell phone in a bag.
Yeah, I remember the satellite ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and you open it up. I carried it on the little hump on your truck. Carried it right there. I'd pick that thing up and call. And one of the black kids at Ascot Park, when we were running steadily at Ascot Park, at one time in the mid-'80s, we had about 60 black guys riding. 60.
Really?
All mini bikes. And the dads showed up. There were doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. They weren't, they were Mercedes, Cadillacs, stuff like that. They'd open the trunk and take the mini bike out of the trunk of the car. They didn't have a trailer or anything. And one night, two riders, white kids, gave the black kid a bunch of shit. And the black kid went home, got a bunch of his black buddies. They came out. And that one night, I had 15 LAPD cars around the track at Ascot. 15 of them. They thought it was going to be a race riot. That's what somebody told them. I mean, it was like 40 of these guys and 30 of these guys. And the week after that all happened, all these guys came up to me and said, "Stu, we loved your races." And they've been riding for a couple of years. It wasn't like they've been riding for a short time. And they lived in a high-end area in L.A., where the black folks live. We don't see this kind of stuff. We don't have it with our kids. I'm sorry that happened at your race, but we're not going to be back. So they never came back. But Bobo and 3 or 4 of them, a couple of them are in Florida, a couple of them are in Northern California. They still send Sandra a Christmas card, and they talk on the phone 2 or 3 times a year.
Is that right?
And there's one kid that he was very close to our house in Running Springs. He lived at the bottom of the hill. He was a major. I don't remember what. Yeah, and he was he became an AMT. Then he became a guy that worked as in a hospital on people with broken bones. I mean, he wasn't a surgeon or anything like that, but I mean, he knew enough stuff. He'd built a little reputation to where he could do that kind of stuff. And he came up to visit once to Marina and I at the mountain when we were at the mountain house there. So it's about 50 miles up the hill, he was living down the bottom there, and San Bernardino, that area. And but yeah, we had good relations. All those kids. And a lot of them said the same thing. They told Thunder, man, I don't know where we'd be if we hadn't hooked up with you. Because we took them on Golden States. I mean, remember they were riding in the back of the truck and
To get there?
Oh, yeah, to get there. They were good little workers. I mean, I'd use them as gate guys, and we had to put the starting gates in because we bring sometimes 2 starting gates, all the time 1. We brought our own gate, brought the gate trailer and all that kind of shit up because of these other tracks. And we had to bring all our own crew because when you had those kind of numbers, the average local person would seize. If they saw 200 people standing there in line, they go, what do I do? Yeah. And 6 and 7 girls. And the best thing I ever did was put a toilet in the support unit. And the girls never had to leave the support unit. They go potty and go back to doing what they were doing because everything was done by hand.
Yeah.
Until the last part. But when on the big days, it was all done by hand.
Yeah.
So and I wanted to run a good event. So I had checkers to check the ones after they did their math. You got to go back and redo it to make sure that, because we have 35 pro riders. That's a shitload of riders to by hand do everything.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Well, you ran great races. I can attest to that. I showed up at quite a few of them, and sure appreciate what you've done for the sport, Stu.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time, buddy. It was really great chatting with you.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Well, stick around. That's Stu Peters. We'll be right back to wrap up the show. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed Stu Peters. This guy is truly super instrumental in developing and building and growing the sport of motocross here on the West Coast and across the country for that matter, because California was really setting the pace. And what Stu did with CMC, I mean, basically creating by hand Carlsbad Raceway. This guy's just got a very big spot in motocross history. And so late 80s, still sharp as a tack. We just wanted to get him in and let him tell his story. Well, all of those memories are still sharp and pretty incredible stuff. Maybe one of the first Americans to go over and race in Europe and race the GPs and try to live that dream. So anyway, great story. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Big thank you to all of our partners. We wouldn't bring you this show, could not bring you this show without them. So you see these guys on the board behind me. If you guys are in the market for any of those products, please check them out, support them, support us, and we'll keep bringing you shows. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Yamaha is the industry leader in two-wheeled fun and performance. Celebrating 50 years of YZ in 2024, the Blue Crew is still dominating shootouts and competitions. Yamaha, revs your heart.
Troy Lee Designs is the leader in off-road motocross apparel and style. So whether you're looking for a cool new paint job for your helmet, maybe your name and number on your helmet lettered on, you're looking for new gear, you're looking for mountain bike gear, off-road gear. They've got the brand new Scout line and GP and SE models. Troy Lee Designs has it all. They've been leading this industry for decades, and they're going to continue to do it. Check out TroyLeeDesigns.com. SKDA is a moto graphics and seat covers company with several offices based around the globe. For too long, bikes and graphics have all looked the same. They just start to blend together. SKDA is working to change that. With super clean and unique design work, a bike with SKDA graphics stands out in a crowd and adds a touch of art to the world of moto. Hey, we need that. SKDA prides itself on providing premium customer service both before and after the sale is made. Visit SKDA online to view the current product range and get in touch with their team to get your bike refreshed. I want to just make a mention here that these guys, not only is their design way outside the box, very, very cool, they'll work with you on custom things. The products are incredible. Okay, they'll speak for themselves, but what's really awesome, and you'll notice this the minute you order one of these, man, they give you an email saying, hey, the product's been shipped. Hey, the product is here. It landed in this spot. Hey, it's coming today. Hey, your product's been delivered. They're just so good about staying in touch with you and letting you know where it's at. Customer service is 100%, and that's just something that's rare these days. Check out SKDA. Here at the Whiskey Throttle Show, we're all about supporting brands that support our sport. And there's one tire company that has never walked away from the sport of motocross and supercross, and it's Dunlop. When times got tough and the economy took a crash, Dunlop stepped up and stayed with our sport to support it and the athletes and individuals that love it. Their MX-53 line and MX-33 lines absolutely dominate this sport. Every national championship at the pro level has been won in the last decade, and nearly every single amateur national championship at Loretta Lynn's has been won on a Dunlop. So if you're looking for high performance, you're looking for amazing quality, and you're looking to support a brand that never turns its back on our sport, there's only one choice for you, and it's Dunlop. Pro Circuit is the leader in aftermarket performance and quality. Whether you're looking for a little more horsepower out of your engine, some quality hard parts to improve the way your bike feels and looks, better handling through suspension or linkage arms, Pro Circuit is where you need to stop. It's your one-stop shop. You can go in there and get everything you need to make your motorcycle go from average to exceptional. Pro Circuit's got enough number one plates on their wall to side an entire home, and there's a reason for that. They're very, very good at what they do. The highest quality products with one goal in mind, and that's winning. Check out ProCircuit.com. Nihilo Concepts is leading the way in aftermarket hard parts. With their secondary on-switch device, something that was much needed in this sport, they've been innovating and bringing new products to market. Their latest is the new Nihilo Run Cool brake pistons. They're designed to be stronger than stock and provide exceptional cooling performance with less brake drag. Most OEM calipers pistons are made from aluminum that just can't hold up to the heat and extreme demands of serious racing. When they get hot, the aluminum will distort, causing loss of hydraulic pressure and brake failure. Nihilo's Run Cool pistons limit the area that boiling hot hydraulic fluid is able to come in contact with the piston, leaving 2/3 of the piston volume in open air with breather holes to enhance the cooling ability. It's made of a proprietary stainless blend, which is better at dissipating heat. You have issues with brake fade or brake failure, check out Nihilo Concepts among their many amazing hard parts and carbon fiber parts and titanium. NihiloConcepts.com. Seat Concepts is the leader in motorcycle saddles. If you're looking for a new cover or a new seat entirely, Seat Concepts is the place to go. They make custom seat foams catered to your height, weight, riding ability, riding type. They also have waterproof covers and foams that will not break down if you ride in a lot of inclement weather. And they pride themselves on being much more comfortable than OEM or any other aftermarket company. If you're looking for a new seat or a new cover, Seat Concepts, there's nothing better. Need to replace something on your bike that's worn out? Look no further than ProX. These guys aim to make everything OEM quality or better at an affordable price. And they've also got some new products coming. So right now, chains, sprockets, anything inside the engine internally, air filters. If it wears out, ProX makes it, and they make it at a quality level that's OEM or better. And they've got some new things coming that are awesome. A complete engine rebuild kits for the Polaris RZR 800s. Need to replace something on your bike that's worn out? Look no further than ProX. These guys aim to make everything OEM quality or better at an affordable price. And they've also got some new products coming. So right now, chains, sprockets, anything inside the engine internally, air filters. If it wears out, ProX makes it, and they make it at a quality level that's OEM or better. And they've got some new things coming that are awesome. A complete engine rebuild kits for the... If you've got a little Grom that's looking to get started in the motorcycle world, the best way to get them going is on a Stasic bike. They've got multiple sizes, so from your very young Groms to those who are a little more grown up, you can start them safely. They've got controls that allow you to control the speed so he can't get going too quick. They can touch the ground. There's not a lot of noise to distract them. It's the perfect way to get your child involved in motorcycling at a very young age. And if you've got a kid who's already out ripping, there's series popping up all over. For those of you in Southern California, go to www.ameminicross.com and join their local series. If you're outside of this state, contact your local track and ask them about starting a Stasic class at your local track. Get over to Stasic.com and check out all they've got going on. And finally, last but not least, Specialized Bicycles. If you are in the market to start pedaling, this is where you want to start. They've got great entry-level bikes all the way up to the Cadillac, the new Levo e-bike, anything in between, man. It doesn't matter what kind of riding you're doing. Go check out and start with Specialized. Don't waste your time on something that's going to break. The derailleur's not going to shift after a couple months. Get something quality. These guys make it. Specialized leads that industry.
Thanks for watching and listening to the Whiskey Throttle Show. Be sure to like and subscribe to get notified when new shows go up. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And visit whiskeythrottlemedia.com for additional content.